So officers, could you just, when you're doing your reports, just get through them, and then we can move on to questions and any explanations you can give there. So I know Dom Care will be quite something that we're getting into reference to questions. And then we got homelessness and the strategy, the programs, and then budget monitoring with the senior officers there from finance. Right, good morning everyone, and welcome to this will be our final meeting, unless anything crops up, of Adult Select Committee. Maybe a final meeting for forever as Adult Select, who knows? We'll find out tomorrow. I just want to thank you all for joining the committee, the Select Committee, and participating in scrutiny within Monmouthshire on Adult Select. Thank you to our cooperative members also for putting their time in. Thank you to officers for giving you support and attending the meetings, and thank you to Hazel and Rob for being there when we want you, and for putting the agendas together. Many thanks to everyone really, and I wish you well everyone, and good luck in the oncoming months. We seem to be moving forward with lots of things. A couple of crises out there, as we all know, but so we're strong, and we'll keep going through all this. So that's my little bit done. Welcome members. Officers, could you just introduce yourselves when you're putting your reports forward? So if there is anybody looking in there, at least they know who you are and what you do within that portfolio. Right, apologies for absence, Hazel. Do we have any apologies this morning?
We don't, Chair.
Okay, declarations of interest, as and when members, if something you feel you need to just declare it, we'll sort the paperwork out for you after the meeting. Just put your hand up, and we'll make sure that's noted. Right, public open forum. I don't think we have anybody speaking this morning. Are we okay with that, Hazel? Rob, anybody wanting to put anything forward from the open public forum?
We don't, Chair, no. Okay,
right. I know we've got the Dom Care report. Now the report came as a separate annex mail, so if members can just have a quick look at that one. And who do we have reporting today to us? Is it Rebecca? Hi.
Yes, Rebecca can introduce the report for you. Ian Bakewell's here, and Stephen Griffiths also.
Right, on Dom Care. And Eve, have you anything on this one?
Yes, if it was okay, I was going to go through the presentation, Councillor Howarth, and then have questions after.
Yeah, we'll do that one then. Yeah, if you take us through the presentation, and then we'll bring the questions in after. Everybody happy with that? How long will you be, Eve? Not very long, or
5 minutes.
That would do fine, no problem. All right, yep. Okay. Members, Eve will take us through a presentation of cross-cutting of the report there. Thank you, Eve.
Okay, so can everyone see that on the screen?
Yeah, I got it. Everybody else okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, we're fine, Eve.
We've got no raised hand, Chair, again.
Okay, let me just have a quick look.
It was on the facility when we did but it's not on the top there now at the moment.
Okay, can we sort that out, guys?
Yes, Chair, we'll introduce it after the officer's done her presentation.
Okay, thank you. Right, Eve, carry on.
Okay, thank you. So this was just to give Adult Select an overview of where we are currently with domiciliary care, to look at and explore some of the broader issues, to give you an understanding of the current situation, but also the deteriorating situation over recent years, to let you know what we have done and what we are doing, and look at some of the broader implications and solutions. So currently, everyone knows domiciliary care is a very important aspect of adult social care, and a lot of the other services are reliant on domiciliary care, and when dom care is in a difficult situation, it has a direct impact. We currently provide nearly 36,000 hours of dom care a month, but the trend is upwards. So our dom care consists of enablement, people working to rehabilitate people, longer term care, including dementia, end of life services, and we also have a community night service. So what we do is we support people looking at their individual needs and outcomes, and that can be very varied. It can be going to someone who needs 4 double-handed calls a day, or it could be supporting somebody to walk outside to the paper shop or their greenhouse. So this is a graph on the unmet need and where we are. So you can see by that, you know, in September 2019, we were circa around above 500 hours of unmet need. This has fluctuated, but on the whole has been an upward trajectory, and now we are currently around 2,000 hours a week unmet need. This is where those people are at the moment. So some are waiting for an increased need on an existing care plan. Some are in the community waiting for a package of care. Some are in reablement who need to move on to longer term care, but can't because there is no capacity. And of course, some people are in hospital. This just gives an idea of where the concerns are across the patches. As you can see, South Monmouthshire has the biggest problems at the moment, but the other areas are still around the 500, 600 hours a week deficit. I won't go into that slide in too much detail, but you can see that the capacity that we've got has gone down in some areas while the unmet need has increased. So our direction of travel, as everyone knows, the Act is about being person-centred, asset-based, and what matters. And what one of our biggest focuses at the moment is a place-based approach. So developing a place-based approach, focusing on a community and the people that live in that place, and that we as statutory services work alongside, with the focus being on enabling prevention, wellbeing and inclusion. So the impact of the demand generally over the last couple of years has been significant. So you can see that although referrals have remained quite stable, the people who are presenting to our services are much more complex. So caseloads over the last 2 years have doubled, with there being particularly a significant increase in demand on our therapy services. So in November 2019, across Monmouthshire, we had 80 people on the waiting list, and now we've got in excess of 750. Just a little bit about workforce, because obviously dom care is reliant on workforce. Again, I won't go into this slide in detail, but as you can see, the turnover in direct care is not significant in comparison to other areas and the All Wales national average. We have had new starters in care at home. We've had 29 new starters since March 2021. This slide just indicates that over half of our workforce are over 45 years of age, with 23% of them being over 55. So that's obviously something of significance for the future. I won't go into that. People have got this if they want to drill down into that information. This is quite interesting because it actually shows that quite a lot of our staff don't actually live in the Monmouthshire area, so they're travelling into Monmouthshire to work in our domiciliary care services. And again, that's something to keep an eye on, because of course in the current climate there are lots of opportunities in lots of our neighbouring boroughs as well. Again, I won't go through this one. This is about why people applied to Monmouthshire. Some of those are nice comments though. So some of the impacts that we've looked at as to, you know, why we have some of the challenges. Some of them are around our rurality, public transport, limited affordable housing for people on lower wages working in Monmouthshire, the labour market. Social Care Wales brought in registration for domiciliary care workers. Some people find that challenging and it's put them off joining. There's a lot of negativity in the media around working in care, that it's a challenging job, it's almost like a last resort. Sometimes there's limited access to further education and limited apprentices available particularly for in care. Employment data, unemployment figures in Monmouthshire are quite low, and of course we're competing in dom care with other sectors such as retail and hospitality. Reasons why people have left: COVID has had an impact, moved to being self-employed. Again, I won't go through all of these. People can read that, or they may have already read that. So some of the changes we need to think about are changing the narrative, as in care shouldn't be a last resort. We should be promoting it as a vocation that people aspire to. Changing the model, we must know people and work with them as opposed to just doing things on a task and time. Change the terms and conditions for the whole sector, and also change the way we work with our providers and partners. So as you know, we were looking at turning the world upside down previously. We were due to go live, but the pandemic hit before we had the opportunity. We're now progressing place-based, which will incorporate TWD, so it will be almost like a hybrid between TWD and place-based. We're also looking at micro carers, which is almost a hybrid between direct payments and providers, where people are self-employed and support a small number of people. The budget is obviously significant. You know, we were already forecasting overspent last year. If we were able to meet that unmet need of 2,000 hours, then obviously that would have a price tag attached to it. If nothing changes, the risks are apparent, really. You know, recruitment and retention, stress on families and individuals. People aren't getting the care and support they need. Our reputation as a service and as a council, and that place-based and TWD would not be achievable. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Eve.
I'm working my way through stopping sharing. Okay, has that worked?
Yep.
Technology.
Right. Is anybody else want to put anything in on that? Ian or Rebecca or anybody else like to say anything in reference to the summary there that Eve has just given us?
No,
Nope.
nothing from it's a social care.
Okay, no problem. Right, do we have the hand up? Andy Uppy? No, I got nothing at the moment. So while I'm on here, could members just shouting? I'll ask Eve a question then while we're just waiting for this hand up to come. I'm sure there's a few questions. Eve, dom care and the care packages that are delivered to people, let's say within Monmouthshire, do they, the differences, can you explain what the difference is between a care package and the dom care? Is it that you're working in hand with the health authorities, or this is a separate package, and dom care, most of it has to be paid for, or some of it's claimed back through the health authorities, etc., etc.? Just a quick explanation, because sometimes it's understanding the difference between dom care, care packages, care in the home, etc., etc.
Well, predominantly package of care and domiciliary care are the same, are much the same thing. So we would assess somebody, and it majority sits with the local authority unless it's continuing health care, which is a little bit of a different element. So somebody is assessed as needing a package of care, and that package of care is provided by either our in-house domiciliary care services or the commissioned providers in the community. So we tend to, in-house tends to be a lot of that enablement and reablement, and some of the more complex, and then others we commission from providers. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So somebody who's, let's say, in one of the main hospitals, which in Iron Bevan Hospital, the assessment of them will be done by the health board. So if memory serves me, that there is a form you have to fill in. It's got 7 or 8 questions on there about their needs and do they meet the criteria, and it's all about what funding they receive. When do we step in on that one then? Are we in that from start, or are we we're in from the start? So let's go back then to something which has been raised and is a major issue we have, is bed blocking. If we are involved in that and we haven't got the numbers or the staff or whatever to accommodate that, then does that mean then the health board and we as an authority have an issue then with bed blocking because we're not doing the assessment as well as quickly because we haven't got the staff to do it? I mean, they may be 10 a week or 20 a week, who knows? But so then we end up with that individual being held in one of the Iron Bevan hospitals for more than they should be. Now that costs a lot of money to keep them in hospital, doesn't it? Than it does getting them out from there. So what it is I just need to be clear then. It's the strands from dom care that we as a select committee we just wanted to focus on and go down really more than anything. So we are in partnership with the local health board, and we work together. So the branches off the trees, we work together on that. Yep. So a lot of bed blocking could be our fault as well, couldn't it? Not the Iron Bevan. Yeah, we can't do the assessment then, and then we have to work out who's going to pay for it all as well, because is it in Iron Bevan paying or is it local authority? And we then have to make sure that families are agreeing to that as well. So yeah, there's a bigger picture to all this, isn't there?
There is, and predominantly the assessments have been completed. So our staff reach into the hospitals and do assessments on people. So, but it's following that assessment whereby it's been decided that person does need a package of care that we hit the sort of stumbling block, as in we can't provide what's been assessed for. But I think that the whole system is a very complex system, and it's not as straightforward as somebody gets admitted into hospital and then we can't get them out because we haven't got a package of care. You know, a lot of what's going on from a Welsh Government perspective is around the fact that, you know, sometimes people shouldn't have been admitted into hospital. There is a level of risk aversity around hospital admissions, and the evidence is very stark that as soon as you admit, particularly somebody who's got several sort of health conditions or who is older, as soon as they're admitted to hospital, they deteriorate significantly. So, you know, there are lots of people from all across Gwent who go into hospital needing nothing, and then by the time they've been in the hospital, and you know there are issues at the moment, and this is this isn't a blame with the health board, this is a whole set of complex circumstances where people are moved around, etc., and by the time it's decided that they're ready to be discharged, they actually need quite a lot of support because of the hospital being in hospital and being deconditioned, etc., particularly people who are suffering from dementia. So I think there are lots of factors, and it's not that straightforward really, but all the assessments for care packages are done by our staff in the integrated services and wider.
So quick question to them. So critical care hospital, the Grange in brackets, critical care, the assessment will be done not there, it will be done when they transfer from critical care hospital to let's say Abergavenny or whatever. No, we assess in the Grange as well. Okay, right, okay, because I thought like the Grange was critical care, then they would come from the Grange to let's say Neville Hall or whatever for the assessment for discharge then. No, but you do assessments in the Grange also. Yeah,
we do turn people around at the front door of the Grange as well. Straight out rather than being they call it stepped down. So unless they absolutely need to be stepped down, then we would get them home if that's the most appropriate route for them.
Okay, thanks. Right, could somebody just direct me there? I don't have any hands up at the moment here. Hazel, are we? Yes, I've got Louise. Right, I'm into a new. Right, I've come down the screen. Right,
I've got my hand up, Chair.
I've got yours. Yeah, no problem. I've found you now. I've got Louise and Martin. So I'll start with the Louise and then to Martin.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think a follow-up question really from what's just been described is basically, I mean, there are occupational therapists in the hospital, and presumably they do an assessment. I presume that the social services assessment is either part of that or combined, and I just wondered how it worked in terms of discharge from wards. The second question I've got is about the table on page 7, where it says there's 104 people with no care at home and waiting for care at home, and I just wondered how those people were being supported in the interim, because obviously if it's reliant totally on a partner or family to provide that, then they're under an awful lot of pressure. And, you know, is there respite care, and are there other options available in terms of support or trying to obtain their own care and getting direct payments? So there's 2 questions there, please, Chair. Through you. Thank you.
Eve?
Thank you. Yes, there are occupational therapists in hospital, and it varies across the county. We have a little bit of a different model in Neville Hall, whereby health board occupational therapists actually were transferred into our team. So we in-reach into Neville Hall and basically work with our own Monmouthshire people. Occasionally occupational therapists there would get involved, but in the main our own social workers, occupational therapists and nurses in reach into the hospital. You know, often we know these people already, or we've been involved. In the Royal Gwent it's a little bit more, it's a bit of a different model, because obviously the Royal Gwent is in a different borough, but we have 2 members of staff. One is a rehabilitation support worker and one is a discharge liaison nurse who sit in our Chepstow team, and they go into the Royal Gwent to identify people from Monmouthshire so that we can try and bring them out. And in the community hospitals, Chepstow and Monavale in Monmouthshire, our integrated team works completely. So there isn't, they belong to the health board, they belong to, they all work as one team. With regard to the 104 people waiting at home, absolutely, it's, you know, we know of those people, we're in touch with them. It is often family and carers that are supporting them. They contact us if they need any extra sort of support, or like you say, Councillor Brown, respite, or whether we try and put in some day respite through other bits of the services or day service type provision. But yes, it's very challenging, and if it deteriorates significantly, then we try and do our very best to pull something together, but we just don't have the staff. So, and I know that the hospital are having conversations with people to say, you will be discharged tomorrow because you're medically fit, whether there is care there or not. So that's obviously something that we're daily having active conversations with them about, to establish what risk we're putting people in if that is the case.
Because there's a concern about whether it's safe as well, isn't there, on a discharge? And also, could I ask a further question?
Yes, of course you can.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about the domiciliary care at home. I think there's a sort of a cap limit on what a family have to contribute in Wales, and so obviously you mentioned situations where there were you know, 4 visits and 2 people going at the same time. I mean, obviously if in a sense that's not available, then you know, there may be financial implications for going into a care home, because I presume those caps don't apply then. And, you know, how would that work out sort of financially for people, because of you know, obviously who may be you know, struggling, because obviously the care home fees are significantly high, and you know, just in about every care home they are high, and you know, I just wondered how that that worked its way out. Thank you.
Do you want me to take this one, Eve? Yeah, thanks, Councillor. In terms of the financial assessment, that's all laid down as a act of law by the Welsh Government in its Social Services and Wellbeing Act 2014. In terms of someone that's been identified as having a care need, they have to undergo financial assessment. In terms of non-residential services, which encapsulates dom care, it is a maximum charge that we can levy, which is currently £100 a week. Moving forward in the next financial year, Welsh Government are going to maintain that £100 a week. So the more someone will have to pay if they're assessed as needing local authority, non-residential domiciliary care support is £100. With residential, there is no cap. So someone might have an identified need where they need to go into a care home, but then the financial assessment, if they can afford to pay for that care themselves, then they won't be entitled to any local authority funded support. And that's part of the process that Steve was on about when social workers do their assessment. Part of that then is the financial resources that a client may have to either contribute towards their care or pay for it in its entirety if it's residential. And sometimes that's where we have sometimes the rub or the conflict, if you like, where someone is fit to be discharged from hospital, but the financial assessment says they need to go into a care home, but they can afford to pay for themselves. And sometimes that is an area of conflict, because when services are delivered by health, at the point of contact they're free. But unfortunately, as soon as it's assessed as needing social care intervention, then it's chargeable under the Act. I hope that answers your question, Councillor, but if not, by all means,
yeah, I think it's very complicated, isn't it? Because I think even in care homes, there's a certain element of sort of medical care support that is supposed to be, you know, contributed to by the health board, as opposed to sort of, you know, the boarding costs, as it were. And I think there's a distinction between that and, you know, the other thing. But you know, it's probably something that I've just picked up along the route, but I don't know, I don't understand the ins and outs of it properly, but thank you.
It is okay, you are right. In terms of a care home, there's two avenues. There's either residential care or there's nursing care. What you talk about is the nursing care element.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
The local authority, it all depends whether someone is awarded continuing healthcare, which Eve touched upon. If it's continuing healthcare, that's 100% health funded. If someone needs to go into a care home, but a small element of nursing provision, then that's something called free nursing care. The health authority will pay for the nursing care element, and there's a supplement that the health board pay. But the hotelier cost, if you like, the accommodation costs, is payable by the local authority. And again, that's where the financial assessment comes in, and a person may not be entitled to local authority support to pay for those hotelier costs. But it is extremely complicated.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor.
Yeah. May I ask you both, Tyrone and Eve there, because it's so complicated, is it actually making it cost effective then? Is because it's complicated, is that costing a lot more money because it's too complicated? Or you know, I mean, I've seen one of them needs assessment forms which are carried out by the health board, and you get everybody around the table and you go through the needs of that individual, and they're a really complicated form then, and you could actually challenge that. So, did they ever get challenged on that form? Because it's all about money, isn't it? Yeah, as I said a few years ago, so everybody has a price on their head, whether they're going to have full care or they're going to have part care or whatever. It's all about a price, all about money, this is. But if it's so complicated, surely that must cost more money as well. Do we not have a direction where you guys get involved in trying to make it more simpler? Does that ever happen, or are we just led by others and we've got to go down them lines? Because it's something which we have in Monmouthshire. Well, everybody's gonna. We're an elderly population. We're all gonna live longer, so it's all gonna get expensive for some, and some are going to want it for nothing, as you say, or they're entitled to have it as well. Yeah, I mean, how many people say, I paid all my taxes, why should you take this, and why should I pay for this? You know, I mean, it's society nowadays. But sure, the system could be made a little bit easier, or do we have any input on that? Can we not make this easier as local authorities get around the table and say, look, an Iron Bevan, or is it led by the Welsh government or the Parliament in Wales? Do they lead it, and this is what, do they have the stick and they say this is what you do, and if you don't like it, tough? How does it all work? Yeah, I mean, because it is, listening to you this morning, and I do know a little bit about it all, it is really complicated. And if it's complicated for us, imagine poor old person out there, how complicated it is for them. Who's got the stick here? That's my question.
I can come in and just generalize, and then maybe if I can just get Eve to come in on the more technical stuff then as and when as an infill, if you don't mind, councillor.
Yeah.
In terms of the complexity, I can't disagree. It is complicated, but we've always had this complication in terms of care. Prior to the Act, it was more the Community Care National Assistance Act, and it was something called the Charging for Residential Accommodation Guidelines that then came through the Welsh office. But since the Welsh Government has got lawmaking powers, and they brought in the Social Services Wellbeing Act in 2014, that has made it a lot more complicated. Where we suffer in Monmouthshire is being a border authority, and where we have got the different rates. So if I take an example just to illustrate, and if you just forgive me, just give me the time to illustrate this. Someone going into a care home, and in Wales, the cap is 50,000. So they can keep 50,000, local authority can't touch it. In England, that's only 26,000. So if you've got a border care home that's only 2 miles into Monmouthshire, it's quite tempting to go into that care home and show that you're a resident of Wales to benefit from that 50,000. And we do suffer a lot of that in Monmouthshire, more than any other border authority in Wales, because the care homes are so close to the border. Sometimes we have people move from Herefordshire into Wales and have to travel 2 miles to a care home, which is less than if they had to travel to a care home in Herefordshire. And they also benefit from keeping an extra £24,000 of capital if they went into a care home. That's made it a lot more complicated. It is a challenge where my team and Eve's team do work quite closely together, where the social worker wants to provide the care. That is their passion, and that comes through from Eve's team. However, we have to balance that with the financial as well, and the requirements of the law to undergo a financial assessment. And it is a challenge. There's a challenge as well, trying to explain that to individuals and family members as well. But we do provide that explanation, and we do try and guide them. However, what we can't, unfortunately, influence is the end result. If they've gone through the financial assessment process, the social worker says, this Tyrone Stokes needs residential care, but then I come along and say, sorry, but you've got finances above 50,000, you've got to pay for it yourself. Unfortunately, that's the end result of the Act. And we have to make sure we are legally compliant, but it is definitely a challenge, councillor.
But this can take time as well, Tyrone, going back to bed blocking and everything else. When you've got somebody who wants to be discharged, and all of a sudden you've gone through the assessments, and they're saying, well, and you could go on for quite some time in doing this. And at the end of the day, like we want them out from the main hubs, i.e. the hospitals, back into the community to take their care package. But and it does go on can go on for some time. Talking about weeks here, can't it? Because if somebody says you've got to say somebody that you're going to have to pay for that, or this is what it's going to cost you. Well, we're not going to do that, or we're going to appeal the assessment form that you've carried out because we don't believe that ticking that box, or you've assessed it on the score. We don't agree with the score, let's say. So it is too complicated, and I mean, if you're elderly or your family don't understand it all, they feel, in brackets, they feel they're being robbed, let's say, because that does happen as well. They're robbing us. We paid all our taxes. You know, we've been there and we know all that. And you probably, like your social workers, they probably agree with it as well, like saying, well, actually, I do agree with it, but that is the law. So the stick is the Welsh government's stick, i.e. from 2014, it's got more complicated. Is that what we're saying here? It's not as straightforward as it should be.
I won't go that far, because that would be one of making a political statement. So
Okay.
I'm not looking to make a political statement. It's more a statement of facts that we have got the Social Services Wellbeing Act. We have to make sure we are complying with the law. Part of that in discharging our duties is performing a means tested assessment to see if people can afford to pay for their own care or not. In terms of turning that around quickly, we make sure that the time to turn that around is as short as possible. However, we still have to make sure it's robust, to make sure that it's equal and fair for all. And sometimes it's getting that engagement from the family as well, to ensure that they've been, I wouldn't say truthful, but have had that full disclosure to us in order for us to provide that timely outcome for the financial assessment. And you're right, councillor, sometimes it just comes down to brass tacks. How much have I got to pay for that care? And people don't like paying for care. There's lots of things that we don't like paying for in society, but unfortunately, that's the fact of life. That is the fact of the law. And people do have to undergo financial assessment. They have the right to forego that financial assessment. The unfortunate consequence of that is if they go into residential care, they forego any financial support from the local authority. But that is their right. They can say, sorry, we don't want you involved in our financial affairs. Like I say, if residential, worst case scenario is, sorry, we won't provide any financial support. If you're in receipt of non-residential domiciliary care, unfortunately, we would levy the maximum charge of £100 a week, as it currently stipulated in the Act.
Do we have many appeals? People who are appealing this, where do they go? You know, I mean, is that explained to people? If you're not happy with what we've come out with here, the outcome, you can appeal. Do we have per annum?
We have a lot of appeals, even more. Quite recently, people are getting more savvy. They're getting more financial advice. You have law firms out there that think they know the law, but then once you start getting into the detail, they realise about how much they don't know, because it is complicated. The appeals pre-2014, I was involved in maybe 1 or 2 a month. Now I'm involved in 3 or 4 a day of people appealing their charges, and we're having more people looking to seek legal advice and legal challenge.
Okay, well, so that's very time consuming and expensive.
It is very time consuming. Yeah, it is expensive, but I suppose that sometimes that's the cost of democracy.
Yeah,
having that ability where people can challenge, and that's just a consequence of it. Similarly as people having care, the financial element is just a consequence of.
Okay.
Can I just
yes,
very quickly, councillor, with that issue about bed blocking and people in hospital, I would say that in the main, the people that are in hospital who are waiting for residential or nursing care homes are usually those who don't have capacity. So that adds another layer of complexity. So they don't have capacity to make that decision themselves. So then you're having to look at what's the decision in that person's best interest. And that's where you can often get into complications with families. And then sometimes, you know, if people don't have lasting power of attorneys, then those end up in the court arena. So we're not in a position to facilitate the discharge because we have to wait for the court to make a decision. So that's a complexity. And then, as we said before, the CHC is a complexity too.
Okay, not nice getting old. So,
get your LPA done.
Yeah,
sounds
that. Yeah,
sounds
good.
quite frightening. Sounds quite frightening. Yeah.
I was just going to add that with Eve, where people don't have lasting power of attorneys, just don't realise the complication when, unfortunately, you do lose that ability or that capacity to make decisions for yourself, and no one's been appointed, and then you have to apply to the courts and get it more formal.
Okay. Yeah, that is a very good point. Actually, perhaps at a certain point in life, as Monmouthshire as well, we should point to people saying, look, you know, you've got to do this, because it is important in later life that actually you could come up against some real obstacles in another few years. Like, so yeah, it is important. Perhaps there's something we can look at in the near future. Right, I've been meeting blocking here. So right, I got Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Eve, you'll be delighted to know that I have taken out my power of attorney, and every month my bank account seems to get smaller, and my kids seem to dress better, but I don't think they're associated. I think that looking at this morning's agenda, the one thing that struck me was that it reflects what a complex society we live in now. And looking at Ian's housing report that's coming up later, there's some pretty heartbreaking stuff in there. And looking at what Eve and Tyrone have just been saying to us here, there are some enormous social difficulties wrapped up in this. And it was interesting to hear Eve saying that many of our domiciliary workers don't live in Monmouthshire. They can't afford to live in Monmouthshire, is what we actually mean. And it seems to me that we are now becoming increasingly reliant on a system that relies far too heavily on the private industry model. When I was a kid, the local authority seemed to look after you from cradle to grave. These days, the local authority goes and buys services from companies, and companies can only exist if they make a profit. That's a basic law of economics, it seems to me. Now, I wonder if it's not time that we look at how complex things are and maybe go back to simplifying them, because I think in all sorts of areas of our social services model, we are buying in things that at one time we were provided ourselves, and that includes domiciliary care. I think that we're in a very fragile position at the moment, where some of these private companies from whom we buy services are themselves struggling, and because of the way they have to be organised, could easily go under in a state of bankruptcy. And this is a terrible way to organise our services. Now we're coming to the end of this council and moving forward to a new one within a couple of months. Could we not say this is the time when we have a fundamental rethink and we start to pay our own staff to provide domiciliary services in the name of Monmouthshire County Council, not in the name of such and such a private company? And in so doing, retake unto our own control the process of looking after our own people. I just throw that into the pot because I do worry that people currently getting services, and we saw from Eve's slide there that there are also many people who are entitled to services that aren't getting them. The whole thing could come crashing down like a pack of cards. And maybe the model is not working, and it's time to look again right from the basis of our organisation. Thanks, Chair.
If you don't mind, I'll do the same again. If I just try and generalise and then just call upon Eve's expertise just to fill in the gaps on this. Thanks, Councillor. In terms of outsourcing, it is what you're mentioning. Even though we outsource some of our care, that's just a way of us carrying out our duties. We're not abdicating any responsibility. So a carer that goes in, even though they might have a tunic that says a different a care name of the care agency, they're still doing it on behalf of Monmouthshire County Council. In terms of employing more in-house carers, that's what we've been doing over the past couple of years. We have boosted our in-house care provision a lot, so much so that in the month 9 forecast, it's something I can touch upon, and I've been touching on previous forecasts. That's one reason why we're continuing to overspend in adult social care, is due to us grossing up our in-house care provision. In summary, employing our own carers. However, that does come with a cost. The terms and conditions of Monmouthshire County Council, if you look at the pension contribution being one of the biggest ones, in the private sector, the private contribution by an employer in the private sector is 3% into the overall pension pot. Monmouthshire County Council, that is more like 23, 24%. So instantly you've got a 20% increase in overheads by employing our own carers. Again, it comes at its cost, represents itself as an overspend, and the need for more budget to come into adult social care. So again, it's just that balancing act. And also, there's not a pot to employ carers that's just for the private sector, and a pot that we can tap into. It's just one resource. We employ carers from the same pot. So if the external sector is struggling to recruit and retain carers, we are as well, because we're all accessing the same pot. So it's just difficult, is what Eve was touching on. I think is the more pertinent point. It's just social care is not seen as an attractive career, an attractive industry. If I make an illustration, someone has to go into someone's care home or into someone's home to provide care. They've got to do those personal tasks that are required for the same amount of money, or sometimes less than, say, working in a supermarket or working in a bar or factory, for example. And is one of those ones where sometimes that's maybe more attractive to the individual, and sometimes care not seen as a career. And that's something that we have to try and get over, because unless we get those new recruits coming in, everybody's going to struggle. Even if we bring all care in-house tomorrow, we still can't access the carers. And I think that's the fundamental thing we have to try and turn around. And that's multifaceted in Monmouthshire County Council, because the cost of care is so much more. Unfortunately, we have to try and transport carers in from areas like Merthyr Tydfil, Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly, that Eve's map was showing.
Okay, that's a great explanation, Tyrone. It does boil down to how much it costs, doesn't it? I mean, and actually what you said there is probably what our thoughts have been for many years, is why should you go and do all them things in somebody's home or whatever, when you can go out there and have it a little bit easier? The pension part.
Can I just ask Tyrone a supplementary there, Chair?
Yeah, of course you can, yeah.
Do we know that all of the private companies that we're using are in a financially sound position at the moment, or is there a risk that some of them might go under?
Just before I answer that, Councillor, just coming back to Councillor Irworth, another thing as well, especially if carers got to be registered. So you've got to be registered to earn, say, £9 an hour, but you don't have to be qualified to work in a bar for £12 an hour. So what would you choose?
I know.
And I know what I would choose. I choose the £12. I don't have to do any more school exams, if you like.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I just want to add that in. So thanks, Councillor Grocroft, for allowing me the time just to answer Councillor Irworth on that one. Answering Councillor Grocroft now at the moment. In terms of what we know today, but we can't give any guarantees. We're not aware of any companies out there that are on the financial brink that will go under tomorrow. However, they are under extreme financial pressures, which is currently being masked by the COVID Hardship Fund. In 29 days' time, the COVID Hardship Fund ceases from Welsh Government. That's when we will start seeing those real challenges coming through. And we don't know what we don't know at the moment. We are in constant dialogue with those providers, trying to understand what their pressures are, not just from a cost, but there's also some of the staffing pressures that I was just mentioning, and trying to work with our sector, because I think it's unrealistic to think that tomorrow we could just take it all over and the Monmouthshire County Council and everything would be right, because we still got those same challenges that I previously mentioned. But in a quick summary, rather me digress and babble on, if you like. From what we know today, we're not aware of any company out there that's potentially could go bust tomorrow. But
we have though, Ty, had significant handbacks at times from companies who aren't on the brink, but have considered that working and providing in Monmouthshire is no longer a viable option for them, and therefore they've given us notice on packages of care, some which have been quite significant, and you cannot imagine the stress and angst that brings about when we're in that situation.
It is very difficult, and if you look at those providers that he was on about, sometimes it's not cost effective for them to bus in their carers from Blaenau Gwent into Monmouthshire. They might as well just get more into that local authority in Blaenau Gwent as an example, and provide more care in Blaenau Gwent and save on that transportation into Monmouthshire. And like Eve said, when that happens, it is a very difficult challenge. And we're also already a depleted care market.
Okay. Martin, nothing else? No. No. Okay, Tony.
No, that's fine, Chair. But I think I have raised some significant comments there that maybe we do need to project into the future and keep an eye on just where we are with the fragility of that private market.
Yeah,
and I think that would tap into what Eve was mentioning in her presentation around moving to more a place-based approach that we were currently mentioning in DMT just before council around our strategy moving forward. And that's going to be one of the elements we'd be looking at, councillor.
Okay, thanks for that, Tyrone. Right, Tony Grovest.
Yeah. Thank you, Simon. I've got to applaud you, Simon, because I followed your speech as you were making it just now, and just the way you said it meant, you know, there were so many questions there and I could follow your track and the way you were stumbling through it all, and it's exactly the circumstances that are out there. So well done, Simon. We've come across a guy who lives in Newport, who was being provided with services directly from an outside provider, and they were failing. When we went down to see him, they were leaving the washing up for weeks on end. They weren't doing any of the other things that make a home nice to live in for somebody with cerebral palsy and no other support. So there is a question there about how we keep tabs on the performance of the people who we're employing outside. As a plug for the Disability Advice Project, I will say that for very little, we actually organise powers of attorney. So if you know people who want to come there and get a power of attorney for next to nothing, then come to DAP because we do it. But in Eve's presentation, she was sort of implying that people can leave hospital without assessment. So there's a question there about, well, how can that happen? Because surely when you leave hospital, when you're discharged, part of that process must be that some assessment is made, not only of the patient's capabilities, but also of the carers and of the families. And picking up on that last point about the families, the one set of carers that we've not talked about are the families and the cousins and the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents, and they don't seem to get trained. I mean, everybody else has to get a piece of paper to say that they're qualified to administer to somebody, but that's something that the family carer does because they're family and you love them. It's as simple as that. So is there somewhere where training can happen? And then talking about hospital discharge, there's the work of the housing associations. Now, I know that Mellin have worked with Newport Council for providing a sort of a step down facility where people can leave the Gwent and go in somewhere where they're not at home, but they're in a facility where they won't have trips and falls and all that sort of stuff, you know, and so they're in a safe environment until they feel that they can go home. And so I'm like Simon, there's all these issues that plough into your head. And I guess at the heart of it all is the fact that social services is a local authority thing and health is health, and ne'er the twain shall meet. So I could go on for a long time. I could go on for longer than Simon because we have lots of examples given to us. But I'll stop there because I think I've raised a few issues. So I'm co-opted. I've got no political allegiance. I just want the system to be better than it is. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that, Tony. Eve, do you would like to answer on especially the bed blocking and sending patients home without actually doing the assessments and stuff, because that is really concerning out there.
Yeah, and I would like to assure everybody that, you know, we have got eyes on all our people in those hospitals. You know, we know when people are admitted, we have lists sent to us every day. We know who we've got. The conversations that the health board are having with people are along the lines of, you know, if you're medically fit, you will be discharged home. As I said before, we are very active in those conversations around, you know, what support does that person have at home? You know, what are the risks if they did go home? Because of course the obvious is that if it's an unsafe discharge and somebody is sent home without the support and infrastructure that they need and their carers need, they will end up straight back in hospital. So there hasn't been any gain for that person. So we actively, you know, work to make sure that we can put the best resources in that we can. We do work alongside families in supporting them, you know, particularly around things like manual handling, using equipment, that type thing. At the moment, there is a scheme going on called Step Closer to Home, whereby the health board are funding for a short period of time people going into a residential setting as a step down from hospital. So they will discharge somebody from hospital into a home. That home doesn't necessarily have to be in Monmouthshire. As you can imagine, there's been lots of colourful conversations about this. It's very challenging if somebody has capacity and doesn't want to go into that setting, but they do need care that we can't source. And then, of course, we end up in a situation whereby somebody goes into a residential setting funded by the health board for 6 weeks. And then after that, if we still haven't found a package of care, we're left with, you know, trying to assess that person to understand what we need to do in the longer term, whether or not they want or need to stay in a residential setting, or we carry on with them there and carry on looking to resource care or looking at other creative options. So it is a very complex situation out there. The money for the Step Closer to Home finishes at the end of March. So what the other alternatives will be will have to be considered. But, you know, our view, and this is the view of, you know, from a health perspective, you know, I think we often think of the health board as just being the acute hospitals, when in actual fact the health board are also very present in the community and in primary care. We're having a lot of active conversations with our colleagues in the community and, for example, with Welsh Ambulance Service around how do we stop people going into hospital in the first place, so that if we had a more proactive and robust offer in the community, then we could prevent a lot of this happening. And as I said before, people going in and deteriorating, and then, you know, in some ways the system is creating its own demand by the way that it works, and somehow we have to stop some of that happening so that we can reduce some of this fragility. And if we don't do that, then, you know, the future is going to be very challenging, because the focus does need to be on sustainability and stability going for both partners. You know, local authority and health have to work very closely together if we're going to resolve some of these situations.
Okay, thanks for that, Eve. Tony, are you okay? Anything else which was not picked up on that? No. Okay. Right. I do have Ruth now. Ruth, can you take your hands down, please? Tony and Martin, please. Ruth.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Tyrone is very detailed in his explanations. I've known, we've known one another for a good many years now. And my big concern is recruitment, as you say, I think in the years past, people used to think, oh, well, she couldn't get a good job or whatever, and that the last resource was to go and be a nurse. And that, I think, goes on through the generations, which is very sad, because I've always thought that nurses are born to a certain extent in that caring aspect that's needed. And I think maybe we should be doing more in schools to see what they can, you know, contribute. And a lot of them perhaps haven't got the information to make that decision. And then we've been relying on, you know, people from abroad to fill these gaps, which isn't so available now. And I think it's a very rewarding career if you're of that makeup. Obviously, you're saying about the pensions and so on, and, you know, you could suit your hours in a, you know, stacking shelves somewhere else and all that sort of thing without perhaps so much responsibility that they feel. But it is a very rewarding occupation if they've had all the knowledge that they can, you know, gain from it. Because in the past, if somebody wasn't well, they always relied on a family member to maybe look after somebody. But of course, family makeup is so different today. You know, they get divorced or remarried, they have different grandparents. All of that is in the makeup, which also can cause a problem with this power of attorney. I think people should be more aware of that, because you could assume that the daughter of the patient lives locally, can stand in and help, but perhaps they're not the right one that should be there. It could be somebody 50 miles away. So it's all very complicated as far as caring for somebody who can be at home. And also, if this, what you call a step down, is we used to have what they called convalescent homes, and that is not heard of these days. But and I think the majority of people would prefer to be home as soon as possible if they can have the care. But it's so complex, and if somebody goes into home, I believe they forfeit their pension, and then when they're assessed every now and again, and they're obviously their conditions alter, they might become more dependent on help, and then they are assessed as to whether it's nursing care or not. If it's not nursing care, they have to still go on paying what we used to refer to as top up. And if it was nursing care, although in the same home, they can get help with the financial side of it. So it is very complex, and whether that's altered very much recently, I don't know. But I think that the bottom line is to go into schools, or somebody does that to sort of help the youngsters to think of it as a good career. And years ago, nobody heard of a male nurse. It was unthought, you know, it just never happened. But, you know, we rely a lot on people who have got that ability to care for other people. And I think with Monmouthshire being residents are getting a lot older in Monmouthshire. We all get older if we're lucky, as we say, but it's what comes with it. And I think that is why I said earlier on in planning, we need to think about when we build people's homes, how they can be so adaptable to the needs of that resident so they can stay in their own community as well. But it's very complex, and I applaud your effort all the time and what you're having to do. But I think we do have to start, you know, really getting more on board in our own county then, to give these sort of services, because people expect to have them. And the family makeup today, where perhaps daughters or sons could help, they all have jobs today, if they're lucky as well, and haven't got that ability or the time to do the caring aspect of an extended member of the family. So it is a lot of pressure for a lot of people today. But I do thank you very much for all you do and try to do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Now I do have Peter Davis online, but to ask a question or may answer some questions. But I'll let Roger come in first. Peter, is that all right with you, as a member of the committee? And then I'll allow you in then, Peter. Is that all right?
That's absolutely fine, Simon.
Yeah. Roger, do you want to come in and raise your questions, Roger?
Thanks, Chair. This is my last Adult Select committee. I've been on an adults select committee since I started in 2004, and basically I was hoping to keep out of it altogether and not say anything, because we're in a deeply political crisis, I reckon. But all I want to say is that Martin Grocott hit the nail on the head. We need a fundamental rethink. There's going to be a radical change in the composition of this council in May, and it's incumbent on those of you that come back and those officers, great officers that we've got, and I mean that sincerely. We really have, and I'm grateful over the years for Tyrone and Peter and Natalie, Eve, and not forgetting the people in the background like Hazel. You must all gather together and make sure that the radical rethinks do come in, because whatever happens is going to take a vast amount of money, and we're going to have to find it from somewhere. So I wish you all the very best, and I'll be looking occasionally in on the sidelines, and I'll be writing letters if you're not being naughty, if you are being naughty boys and girls. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Roger, and I wish you well, and to Maggie as well. All right. Right, I've got Ruth's hand come back up. Maybe a mistake there, Ruth, but I'm going to allow Peter to come in now. Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's only a brief input, really. I mean, it's I guess from a selfish perspective, I mean, I'm sat in the call today really to act as a little bit of a sponge. I'll explain why that is the case now in a moment. But I thought an excellent presentation by Eve. Very informative responses to some very sensible questions from both Tyrone and Eve as well. I think just to offer some wider context, I think there's an acknowledgement, isn't there, that we have an affordability challenge here. And when we sort of talk about putting adult social care on a sustainable footing, you know, using some of Eve's words of earlier, you know, and that's something that's featuring in part within the draft budget proposals that not only have you know, not only the ones that are being considered and will be considered well this afternoon by Cabinet, by Council tomorrow for next year. You know, some of those pressures have featured certainly in more recent years as the situation has become more significant and severe. You know, we're carrying quite a significant budgetary risk even alongside the budget provision we've made for next year. Because the fragility of the system is thus, and you know, it's right and proper that people who are obviously providing care, not just through the council, but as has been said, through the private market, that they are paid at a you know, a suitable rate of pay. A lot of that's contestable. In terms of what that rate should be, but you know, there are clearly efforts by Welsh Government, by the council, in terms of looking to make sure that we try to pay better, and again to try and attract and in fact retain you know, the necessary supply of quality labour into the market. So you know, notwithstanding all the challenges, I guess a level of comfort that I wanted to provide, and you know, you can comment on this as much as Tyrone can, but you know, there's some very targeted work to be done around probably our commissioning arm. You know, some of that's ongoing already, but obviously we need to make sure that in a way we're not held hostage to an evolving situation, you know, with a significant financial consequence to that. This is a case of, I guess, working, you know, with with the sector, and to ensure, and again, that it's put on a sustainable footing. I guess my role and my interest, where I'm again acting like a sponge at the moment, is that I guess I've made a bit of a personal effort to try and get the Society of Welsh Treasurers, I guess local government finance, WLGA, I guess a bit more closely aligned with the work of ADSS, the Association of Directors of Social Services, and with the aim to work collectively to put shape to what a sustainable system for adult social care could look like. So, you know, what are the features of that sustainable system? You know, and I think it was Councillor Grocot's point, you know, there's part of simplification within that as well. I think there's points that have been made on the call today about that interplay, to Eve's earlier point around health, you know, where it sits in the community, and social care. You know, funding and affordability will be a key feature to that, and you know, that'll have to be, you know, very carefully managed going forward. But the aim of that work is to really start to have a much more purposeful discussion with Welsh Government, such that, you know, we working in the sector, working with the issues, working with the detail, can bring a very informed business case forward to Welsh Government, and start to engage in a meaningful conversation as to, you know, what moving adult social care towards that sustainable future, what that looks like, how much it costs, and what sort of significant changes need to take place as a result. So I think I just wanted to just echo that, because it's not a case, and it's not, is it, Eve? In and amidst all the very significant challenges, the proverbial firefight that goes on every single day, there is a need to step away from that and operate alongside of it with our partners, with Welsh Government and others, to make sure that we're putting some of the design together to take things forward and into that sustainable future. Otherwise, and to your earlier point, you know, it's a pretty dire set of circumstances that we're going to face otherwise, if we just allow this to unfold and play out upon us.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter, and it gives us an overview of where we are with delivery, and a model, etc. Yes, it's not easy out there, and it's not going to get any easier for some time. And Peter, as you know, with finances and budgets, etc., it's going to be difficult, really difficult. But we are where we are. I'm never a doom monger. Get on with it, and we'll hopefully come out at the end of the tunnel with better models, and perhaps when I get a little bit older and want support, etc., maybe some time off, but maybe a different model, and maybe different out there. But we are where we are, and people want that there now, and you know, I mean, we've got to keep tugging away and making sure that we can provide whatever we can provide. I do find it really difficult that we have the support out there, but our providers as well, and there is a balance there. I don't think you're ever going to be headhunted in social care or delivering care. Nobody's going to be headhunting you to go out there and do it. So you cannot take from Peter to feed Paul. It's all about delivery, and it is really difficult. So you take 5 employees from a different company because you got a better package. That company suffers, but it's not the company suffers. It's the people out there which are going to suffer, because, you know, I mean, them people are so valuable. They're going to deliver the same terms and of what they deliver in care, working for Monmouthshire as they work for one of the other companies. They're going to deliver this because they're the same human beings. They may have a spring in the step, perhaps, because they've got a better package. But as we all know, you probably expect more then. You know, I mean, nobody gives nothing for nothing nowadays. I've been around a long time. You know, I mean, you can give somebody something for a little while, and the newness wears off, and we end up with the same kind of thing. But you know, we are human beings, and when somebody's told they got to pay for care, you know, I mean, it's really difficult out there, because you know, I mean, they'll say, well, we pay. I get the old scenario. We pay our council taxes, or we we've paid all our national insurances. We don't expect to pay for this. You know, we've all been there and we all know what it is. But at the end of the day, we are human beings as well, and that's how we think. I don't think I've got any more questions out there. I think most have been answered there. I say we'll move on to our next agenda item. Thank you all for your hard work. And COVID hasn't gone. We all know it's still there, and we all keep tugging along. So wish our staff and thank them for all their hard work, Eve and Tyrone, and keep going. And we'll see you hopefully see you in the next council, Eve. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks from me as well. Thank you.
It's all right. All right. Thank you, everyone. Right, I'm just going to fire up my computer, my other computer. One of the. I think we're Ian Batewell and Steve Griffiths on the next agenda item till I fire up my computer on homelessness and the strategy. Good morning, both. Sorry, it's taken a little while to get to you, but we are there. I think sitting in on that meeting, it's not easy, as we all know, and but it's not doom and gloom because we're all here. So there's many not here with us. So we'll keep tugging away at it. Right, do you want to take us through this report, Ian or Steve? I don't really care which one. And then we'll ask some questions then, all right?
Yeah, I'm going to hand over to Steve. Steve's largely written the report with the support of Rebecca Cresswell. So it's been a big job for them. So
is Rebecca with us? Is she with us, Rebecca?
Yeah, Rebecca is here.
Rebecca. Okay. So between you then, so Steve and Rebecca. Yeah. Steve, bring the report in, then Rebecca, then if you want to add to it, and Ian then at the end, then and then members come in then. Is that all right, Steve?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good man.
Just a short presentation. Bear with me while I bring it up. I had a bit of a technical issue earlier on. I hope it doesn't happen now. Can anyone see now that sort of a blank page with the strategy on?
Yes, got that.
The heading of the strategy anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good morning all. Yeah, the strategy, bit of a slog at the beginning, to be fair, but we managed to get there. I've got a short presentation, that's all, just setting out the why we need it, you know, the whys, the wherefores, and what we did basically. And why we need it is because it's a Welsh Government requirement. We are required as a council to produce not only a homelessness strategy, but also a housing support programme strategy every 4 years, and every 2 years we have to then review that. Our last strategy was done in 2018, and that was part of then the Gwent strategy that we produced, covering the 5 local authorities in Gwent. It was decided that, given that probably now we were due to do another homeless strategy, Welsh Government decided that and the provision, the housing support programme strategy were coming together at the same time, that it would be better to combine them into one strategy. So this now is the overarching strategy for both support and homelessness. It's there basically to have a clear strategic thinking now process in how we're going to tackle homelessness and support in Monmouthshire, in the county, particularly now with COVID and the areas of what COVID have done, you know, in terms of what we're bringing people in off the streets now and placing them into temporary accommodation. So and Welsh Government's response into ending rough sleeping. What does it do? Well, as I just said earlier, it outlines the strategic direction for housing-related support and homelessness within the county. How was it developed? We tackled this with a sort of a 3-pronged approach, and it followed a a template as well, to be honest, like that Welsh Government supplied, which revolved around the statement of need, a stakeholder questionnaire, and focus groups. And I'll go into each one of these now separately. The statement of need, that really provided all the raw data and gave us the level of need within the county. In the main, it used data that local authorities collect for Welsh Government. Some of you may know it, but it's called the WHO 12. And just to run through what those WHO 12s are, basically it's the main duties, the main statutory duties that the local governments have, that the council has. So it's the duty to undertake an assessment. Basically, if anyone approaches the council with a housing or homelessness issue, we have a duty to make an assessment. We then, and this is the important now, there's more focus now on homelessness around prevention, and section 66 is what we call the prevention duty. And that is to take reasonable steps to prevent or alleviate homelessness within the county. That now is the focus of the strategy on Welsh Government as well. There's other focuses as well, but this is the main one. Preventing it before we get to that state of homelessness. We then have a duty to provide emergency accommodation. And then if the preventative measures fail up there, we then have a duty then to go on and actually help secure accommodation as well. And finally, if we are unable then to alleviate or prevent homelessness, we then have a duty to accommodate, which is section 75. And generally speaking, then we're offering them properties, you know, in social housing, or we can discharge into the private rented sector. That was the main data source of collection that was in the statement of need. But we also then collected data, sort of narratives then from our stakeholders. And that was sort of garnished then through an engagement process of the consultation questionnaire that was sent out to various individuals within our service providers and our stakeholders. And then we also conducted a number of focus groups. What did our statement of need illustrate? Well, basically that there was a change in the profile of homelessness. In as much as there was an increase of young people and single people, and that had a knock-on effect then. And of that group, a high proportion of those required high to medium support, or medium to high medium housing support. This resulted in an increase in temporary accommodation, the use of temporary accommodation. Bear with me, I got a hack. Bear with me. Something has gone awry. Okay, I'm back. I'm back in the room. This has seen an increase in the use of temporary accommodation, with really an over-reliance at the moment on B&B accommodation, which in turn is increasing not only is that bad for the individuals and the householders concerned, it's not very cost effective to the council as well, using increased. If you couple with that with some of the other stuff that the statement of need illustrated, such as low social housing turnover, which has slowed now, and a private sector in Monmouthshire that's contracted slightly in the number of properties that become available to rent, and also, Monmouthshire is also known as quite an expensive area to rent. Basically, it basically means at the moment the costs to the individual household and to the council is really not unsustainable. It's not sustainable at all. So it also showed that there is a need that homelessness isn't really just a housing issue. It's, we rely on others to help to actually defeat homelessness. So we know that it showed the importance of collaborative and partnership working, and that of the supporting staff. So how did it do it? It sets out our future, our vision for the future, but it identifies 5 key areas or priorities. And within those then priorities, there's going to be a number of actions that we would hope will start to make some dent into the, into preventing homelessness. Those priorities is to identify the risk of homelessness as early as we can, and then provide timely interventions to prevent homelessness occurring. So we're really going and use a phrase now that seems to be the buzzword, upstream, further upstream, and trying to identify those key issues, key points that can point to a potential homelessness occurring sometime, within that household's journey in the future. If we can do that, that's one nut to crack. And then once we've identified them, is to provide timely and effective support for especially those with vulnerable and high complex needs. And then actually increase another priority 3 is to increase access to a range of affordable and sustainable housing solutions. To establish a rapid rehousing transition plan. This is another area where Welsh Government are focusing on now going forward. And I'll go into that in detail a little bit later. And finally, we need to be able to do all the 4 above, the 4 priorities above. We really need to look at the availability and effectiveness of our resources, our staffing, our staffing resources, so we'll be able to tackle this successfully. So priority 1, to identify those at risk earlier and provide timely interventions to prevent homelessness occurring. This priority really is about, it is, as I said earlier, it's about prevention and early identification of issues. That is the key to this. It's not an easy nut to crack, I don't think, but it's something that we really have to focus on now over the next 3 to 4 years, if we are to reduce, especially if we reduce the number of people coming to us with homelessness issues. It's also to create a service that is more proactive to changing housing need. Currently, you could say we firefight. That was a word that was used earlier on in another service area, but it's the same with homelessness. We tend to firefight. We tend to be reactive instead of proactive. So that's something we are looking to change the service now to become more proactive. We need to identify funds and invest in resources. Certainly with regards to households that are considered high risk, such as those that may be suffering from mental health, or young people, or of substance use. Priority 2 is more around then, once you've done the identification, that you get in that support then, which is timely and effective. And also we need to seek to identify additional, again, it's resources to increase the capacity of the housing support programme and support it to meet the local need. And with regard to the housing support, we will be reviewing and looking and commissioning the programme from April 2023. Within the support, this priority 2, one key action would be expanding housing first and increasing the supply of supported accommodation for people with complex needs in and around substance misuse and mental health. Priority 3 is more about then, if we haven't been able to prevent somebody coming through as homeless, so they're not, and that what we mean by, I suppose another way of looking at that is actually keeping in the home that they are at the point they come to us. If they lose that, then we have to then start looking for other forms of alternative forms of accommodation, and that would include both temporary and permanent housing as well. So how will we be doing that? Well, we'll be making full use of the social housing programme. For example, additional social housing, temporary housing and supporting housing. We need to make greater use of the private rented sector, and certainly by using and developing further our Monmouthshire letting service. And also we've now signed up to the Welsh Government's National Leasing Scheme. And I suppose between the both of those, the Monmouthshire letting service and the leasing scheme, we would hope to create and attractive packages to attract landlords to come to us then with their properties and offer their properties up to us, basically. We were exploring opportunities for utilising the existing stock more or slightly differently. Another way of looking of attacking this would be to explore opportunities with empty properties and spaces above shops, and hopefully we can bring a few of them in. And again, target with targeted at so our client base, basically. We'll be looking at utilising any council assets, and if there are assets out there from other statutory bodies out there that own land. We'd be exploring opportunities to purchase accommodation. Bear with me, I'm not too sure about the modern methods of construction. Maybe Ian could come in with that, 'cause I'm not sure what that is.
That's the use of like modular systems and factory built systems that Welsh Government are encouraging.
Yeah, and then using the and utilising the Strategic Housing Forum group that has been recently set up. Rapid rehousing. This is the other focus of Welsh Government. This is required by September 2022. We need to have an action plan in place by 2022, and we've now started. So it's the next job for us, basically, and we've now started at the beginnings with that. We have to get a draft in to Welsh Government by July. And basically what that is, that rapid rehousing, it's a housing-led approach to rehouse homeless people, households, making sure they reach settled accommodation quickly, and that they're not staying in temporary accommodation for longer than is absolutely necessary. As we know, and as it's been well documented, households that stay in temporary accommodation, and it's certainly if they're staying in B&B type accommodation, that has a detrimental effect to their health. It needs to be, this plan will be 5 years in making, and eventually it will remove the use of temporary accommodation, or at least diminish it, reduce it quite significantly. So you're looking to move people into permanent accommodation, whether it be in the private rented sector or in the social sector, much quicker than we're doing it at the moment. And I suppose these are, when you're going on there, it's a priority. We really need to think through how we're going to get to that end goal, and this is what this process between now and then and when we complete the plan by September, how we're going to set out, how we're going to do that, how we're going to. And the key factor, I suppose, as well with the rapid rehousing, as it is with a Housing First, which I mentioned earlier, it's a step change, basically. Whereas we normally had households that we would have to get tenant ready or tenancy ready before we placed them into tenancy. The step change now with this is that we place them into accommodation, and they don't have to be tenancy ready. What we would the crux is that when as soon as you put them into accommodation, they have instant support, and that support then will follow them through. Will be there when they're in that tenancy, rather than the support happening before they're in the tenancy. So it's housing led in terms of they get their accommodation first, and at the same time they get their support. And priority 5 basically is to be able to do all that. We need to maximise and increase the availability and effectiveness of financial our financial resources, and not just financial probably, but our staffing resources as well, and also call on others then that can help us as well and use the resources of other organisations and stakeholders. I think that's bear with me. Well, that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Ian, have you anything to add to the report?
No, only just say thank you to Steve and Rebecca for everything they've done. But yeah, happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, Rebecca, is there anything you'd like to add? Anything? No? Yes?
No, I think Steve covered it very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just have some directions, Steve, then? So we're looking at the draft document today, and then that then goes forward then to a full draft or a full version for a single, that'll be a full council decision as reference to policy, yeah?
Yeah, I'm looking at Ian then. I'm taking my cue for Ian. Yeah, that would seem. Yeah,
and that'll be sometime probably July time or September or in the next sitting of council, yeah?
Yeah, we've got permission from Welsh Government for it to be agreed in retrospect.
Okay, thank you. So we're talking probably early summer or so when we're talking, we'll be bringing.
We're expecting June or July.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, right, members. Do I have any questions for either Rebecca, Steve, or Ian on the document? I'm just putting up. Right, I've got Ruth. Ruth.
Right, thank you, Steve, Ian, Rebecca. Yesterday morning we had a seminar on homelessness, as Ian was there as well. Very interesting, but it seems to me, I mean, I've been on this committee now for about 18 years, and I do feel sorry that and greatly appreciate that Roger Harris was on the committee as long as I have been, and it's sad to see that he's now stepping down and not for re-election, because it's an ongoing thing in adults, and we all hope that we're going to make a change while we are, you know, in situ in these different committees. The homelessness issue is never going to go away, I'm sure, and there's lots of things that keep on coming up time and time again. And from what I remember in the past, mediation was the word that was used a great deal when Steve was saying about early intervention and so on, of you know, sort of prevention is better than a cure, as we used to say. So obviously that is perhaps worded a little bit differently, but it means the same thing, I'm sure. And obviously, as I said in yesterday's meeting, I think as it's quite young people, under 24, is it, I believe, that the main sort of age group that are single homeless people. Obviously, very often they have issues with drugs, mental health, all that sort of thing. But when you think of bed and breakfast, that's very expensive for the authority. And when I suggested yesterday, perhaps mobile homes in the right locality, because obviously they need the services, they wouldn't have cars, transport, medical help and so on. They need to be in a sort of location where it's easy accessible. But for a temporary thing, I think that would give them some sort of on the road to independence then. And also, I think within this last 5 years, I can't remember what the topic was exactly, but it was brought up about, I know we have houses of multiple occupation when it comes to planning, but of tenants who have, landlords that have a room to let or something like that, that might help some people. Obviously, you have to be very careful as to who you put where. But I'm thinking now as well, the way things are going, we're going to have more pressure on housing, especially when the LDP is obviously reviewed. And we've got, by the look of it, a lot more refugees coming in. So the whole thing is an ongoing problem a great deal in Monmouthshire, but obviously they will require other things than just a roof over their heads. So I think we've got quite a task ahead of us, and I think we have to be positive and think forward. And it is a very difficult thing that we have to take on board, but we have to take it on board and looking forward to it continuing. And I really do appreciate all the officers for all the work they've done ever since I've been here anyway. So as I say, it's an ongoing thing, but thank you all very much indeed. And I'm sorry to see Roger is stepping down. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks for that, Ruth. And I've got Louise. Louise.
Yes, I just wanted to say, you know, a big thank you to Ian and his staff. The reports that we've received shows how difficult it is for to accommodate people and the growing homelessness need. I just wanted to ask, we did discuss various issues in the members' seminar the other day, but I just wanted to ask the question with regard to the plan in relation to the early intervention side and how this would operate. Would this operate in association with the registered social landlords, or how would you actually identify the people who are actually at risk of homelessness in order to get in at the early stage? Because obviously your presentation said that, but didn't deal with practically how you would do this. Thank you.
Well, I can answer, sort of partially answer that. Well, first and foremost, that is the nut to crack, is how do we identify households that are experience some issues that could lead to their homelessness at some point in the future. And it's I suppose, right, when we are looking at ways now of data collection, and I can't remember for the life of me, my mind has gone blank now. Intelligence gathering and gathering data from many organizations that can, like, for one instance, gathering data on, let's talk about vulnerability of households that are experiencing rent arrears. We could, at the moment, we're trying to forge links then with the with either the DWP, then if it's housing credit, universal credit, or if it's housing benefit with their own benefit department, and having households being flagged up to us that may be experiencing or have claimed mine's gone blank now because I'm trying to rush ahead.
Well, what Steve's referring to is data analytics.
Data analytics.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more when you look at sort of rent arrears and they're in receipt of local housing allowance, they will normally ask for a payment, which for the life of me can't remember what that payment is called.
Discretionary housing payment.
Discretionary. I need to be on with it. Do you think I could remember discretionary housing payment? Now that can be a flag. That can be a forerunner or a flag to say that household is experiencing some difficulties that may not, but may lead to homelessness. So if we could, for instance, have that flagged up to us at an early stage, that would be going upstream. That would be an early intervention. We could go in there. We could then maybe find out why that would be, why they've gone into claimed discretionary housing payment. What issues are they? Do they require further support? And that would be further upstream than we are. And using data analytics is one way of doing that. And data analytics is sort of getting data from various sources and then putting it in and then spearing out a risk factor of particular households. So it would require again a step change in the way data is shared between various stakeholders, but that could be one way of identifying further upstream. Okay,
yeah. Louise, you got.
Does anyone else want to come in first? Ian and Rebecca, because I think that was a partial answer.
Yes, thank you. I just wondered if it was worth, surveying the, the current demand for young people and those with complex needs, just to see how they ended up in a homeless situation, because obviously that group has been particularly identified, and I just wondered whether or not you know, a survey of sort of their life experiences in terms of how they ended up in that position might also assist in the identification of people on a prevention basis. And the other issue is about you know, whether it's possible, I don't think it is in the current legislation, but whether it's actually possible to change the circumstance so that landlords get paid direct out of benefits, as opposed to you know, basically the payment being up to the person who receives the benefits, because obviously when debt work is done, the first priority is always, you know, to keep a roof over your head. So I just wondered whether or not those sort of things had been explored as extra areas that could be looked at on an early intervention strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, there's loads of elements to this, and your point about young people, Councillor Brown, is that we're looking to have a system where young people, you know, we can identify potential young people that might become homeless, might be at risk of becoming homeless, so that we can, the theory is you get a housing pathway in place to anticipate possible homelessness, so care leavers, chaotic families, that sort of thing. You point about direct payment. That's a lot harder these days because DWP changed the rules in terms of universal credit, and I cannot remember the terminology, but there is a direct payments arrangement in place, but it's a lot harder than it used to be. So, and I think the other thing that, just to add to what Steve said, Steve's already contacted every estate agent in Wales, in Monmouthshire, to again give them the opportunity to flag up any of their tenants that are beginning to experience low-level risks. And we also want to link with the council's poverty campaign that Judith Langmead has got off the ground. And again, so again, I suppose trying to get the message out there, act early. If you've got a low-level problem, come and talk to somebody. It doesn't really matter who, so we can get in there as early as we can.
Okay.
Yeah. So really, you're talking about a sort of multifaceted approach, really, aren't you, in the strategy?
Yeah. There's no single strand. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, everyone, for answering Louise's questions there. Now, I've got Ruth with a hand back up, but I've got Sheila as well. So I'll ask Sheila to come in first of all, then Ruth after Sheila. Sheila.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for the excellent presentation, because reading through the report, there's a huge amount of information, as there always is in these strategies, and going through it quietly and then receiving this presentation today has clarified a lot of things. We all know and appreciate how much work goes in to providing support for people who are homeless, something we're all really, really worried about. The seminar yesterday was particularly useful as well as background to this strategy. A lot of the questions have already been asked, but something that I'm just thinking about now with regard to prevention and anticipating where the areas are. I mean, you've got data, you've got a huge amount of data. With regard to other authorities, I'm just thinking, is there any way you compare this with what's happening in other authorities and possibly, you know, sort of work together, collaborate and work together on particular areas where possibly you've got more experience in an area than another authority and vice versa. I'm just trying to think, what we don't want to do is to be duplicating work. And I appreciate the amount of work involved, and thank you ever so much. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I think the collaboration side of things, in a funny sort of way, we've won't say we've gone backwards, but I'd say there's almost been like a little bit of a pause, because as Steve said earlier, we the strategy, the previous homeless strategy was a Gwent one, and I think there was I think the issues, you know, a year or so ago were so acute. I think every local authority felt they almost like needed to, you know, get their own house in order type thing. You know, when it was so busy. So that's really why we ended up with the individual strategies again. But we do network very closely with our neighbours. There are quite a number of groups, and actually we've got a meeting at 1 o'clock today with the other Gwent authorities about the rapid rehousing requirement. So again, they're all opportunities for sharing notes. One area that I do know that there is a joint project. There's a joint project on prison, supporting prison leavers. So there's a Gwent scheme been established for that. And I say we're continually exchanging notes really on how are you doing things. How, you know, I mean, one example is our use of security. As you know, again, whilst the security we've had has been really important, again, we know it's not quite the right thing to be doing long term. So again, we've been talking to colleagues in the other authorities about that. So, and I think as things are beginning to settle down in one respect, I would anticipate that joint working will happen more.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, I've got Martin and Roger. Ruth, is your question relevant to what we've been discussing in reference to carry on from your previous question? Or?
Yeah, yes, more or less, especially like Ian was saying about working with other authorities. We used to do a lot with Torvine, didn't we, and about lettings and so on. But I'm just concerned that with the homelessness issue, you know, is increasing, but we're now, it isn't just the lack of housing or suitable accommodation, but the moment now is there's an awful lot of pressure on families now with the cost of living and everything, and perhaps sometimes if there's some mediation and temporarily somebody can step out of that and sort of get some help, and then sort of they can be reunited, is sometimes there's a break that's needed just to calm things down and see if there is any solution, so that they don't need then that accommodation to progress into permanent accommodation, because there is a lot of pressure on family life today with the cost of living. And I wonder if that is anything that would help with the mediation that used to go on. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly I think it's I think the main bit you were referring to there was probably the financial inclusion work that we do. I mean, we've got financial inclusion workers within the housing options team, so we'll support people with outgoings and income maximisation. The gateway, the housing support gateway, Angela Smith is also does a lot of work that way. So it is, and we know that Citizens Advice also provide that service. So it is very much a key part of what we do. When we're trying to find people accommodation, we always do an affordability assessment as well. So again, to try and put them in accommodation that's financially sustainable for them. And in a funny sort of way, that does make things like a little bit harder for us, because obviously you know, we do identify properties that are too expensive for some people, and that obviously narrows the options down for us. But your point about mediation, I think mediation, there is still a Monmouthshire mediation service, and I think that's probably something that's probably has gone off the radar a little bit. But I think on the back of your comment, Councillor Edwards, we'll pick this up and make sure that that's it's part of the, make sure it is part of the prevention toolkit.
Thank you for that, Ian. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Edwards. I've got Martin and then Roger. Martin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Steve. It's obviously a very comprehensive report. Looking at 2.2, the key findings in the strategy, it seems to me that one conclusion I drew from it was that within Monmouthshire there simply isn't enough housing. And at one point you give the figure for the home search team and their failure to find accommodation in many cases. And I've spoken to the team, and I know how much effort they put into the work they do. And it's fantastic. There just isn't the places there. Now, I know in Abergavenny two people who are acquaintances of mine who have had private rented accommodation that they have now taken off the market because they let them as Airbnb. And in areas like Abergavenny, which is promoting tourism, I'm wondering if this is increasingly a difficulty and how much accommodation has been lost, because I noticed that in 2.2 main causes of homelessness, a third is because of a reduction in the number of loss of private rented sector accommodation. And then another third is because families have no longer got the space in their homes. So all of these myths that there are about, people who've thrown out of rented accommodation because they don't pay their rent, I think it puts that into perspective. And I just worry that there is a general reduction in the amount of rented accommodation at exactly the same time that the demand for it is going up, going in the opposite direction. So I'm wondering if I'm unusual in knowing two people who were private landlords but are no longer, because there's more money to be made from Airbnb. And I also noticed that Ian mentioned Jude Langdon and her team, and I was wondering if any assessment or modelling has been done around this perfect storm that we seem to be entering now of what's been called a cost of living crisis. I know a young couple in my ward, and Home Search couldn't find them anywhere. They've ended up in private rented accommodation, but the majority of their weekly income is now going on rent. And with all the other prices shooting up now, if they're spending all their money on their accommodation, then I worry very much for them. And are we actually trying to model what might happen if the cost of living crisis goes on for any length of time, in terms of people not being able to pay for their heating, for their food, for their accommodation? I worry about that a lot. At our last meeting, I think it was the last meeting of this committee, Ian was talking about a new initiative from the Welsh Government that would enable us to buy up big old empty properties. And we did talk about Mulberry House, the old inner London outdoor education centre in Abergavenny on Penny Pound. And there was talk about buying that and being able to do that up to provide accommodation. And that obviously used to be a place that did provide accommodation. It ended up as a youth hostel. So is there any development there as a possibility of helping young people in particular who are homeless? And at the end of the day, it's a comment I'd like to make, very similar to my comment to the last report, that at the end of the day, the report actually comments somewhere that the authority maybe needs its own source of housing units. And wouldn't we be in a much better position if we didn't have to rely on private landlords, but we could actually build a few of our own units for the people who are currently just sort of not being provided for? Thanks.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were talking about Mulberry House and the library, I think the original that was it. That was in relation to our empty property enforcement action plan, and what that is about is actually giving us stronger enforcement position if owners don't actually play ball, as opposed to actually directly being able to purchase accommodation through that route. But having said that, I think your point about owning accommodation and the council having more direct provision is one of the key conversations that has been going on for quite some time. I know that is something that is being given serious consideration. We've certainly been looking at accommodation with that potentially in mind. Your comment about modelling, I don't know the detail, but I'm aware that I'm aware that Jude's team, that is a focus of something that Jude's team is doing and looking to better understand the situation. I will say as well, the rapid rehousing project that we've got to do, albeit it's not quite the same. The heart of the rapid rehousing is around modelling, and so it's simplistically it's about understanding the gap, and Welsh Government are asking us to actually define the gap between housing need and housing supply. So when we've completed it, we should be able to come up with a definitive number of how many properties we are short of in terms of homelessness, and obviously all the other factors, around poverty and affordability. Whilst that doesn't actually go into the actual sausage machine itself, it will very much influence, that how we articulate our gap in terms of shortage of accommodation. And having got that number, it's that number then Welsh Government are expecting us to work towards in terms of building, acquiring rent, acquiring additional private rented, etc., etc. So, we need to be demonstrating how we're trying to fill that gap.
Okay, Roger.
Could I just ask? I also raised that issue of the direct loss of private rented accommodation to Airbnb. Are you aware that am I just unusual in that I know two people who've taken their private rentals off the market?
I wasn't aware of landlords defaulting to if you like Airbnb, but certainly that study that Steve did a year or so ago did show a decline in the market. anecdotal feedback that housing options team get when they get involved with individual landlords, people who have been served notice, is that landlords are certainly selling. So it's certainly the trends feels as if it's down and harder rather than getting better.
Okay, Martin.
Thanks a million.
All right, thank you. Roger.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations, Ian, to you and your team for another excellent report. I've enjoyed them over the years. They're always comprehensive, and you do a remarkable job with the facilities that you've got. And just to say thanks over the years for the assistance you've given to me and my constituents when they've needed it, and keep up the good work. Thank you, Ian, and the
thanks
team.
for your support over the years as well.
Thanks for that, Roger. I don't have any more questions there, team, so I'll just ask a couple myself. Have we taken into consideration now the issue with interest rates fluctuating, and probably there's going to be a rise in interest rates within the marketplace? Added on to that, then the cost of living and all the things associated around this long term. As we all know, with the pandemic as well, thankfully, because it was one of the scenarios that we did look at. Thankfully, the pandemic hasn't brought a lot of repossessions and a lot of things which we were anticipating could do with the support that has been given from Welsh Government and Westminster, reference to supporting people in work and etc., because that's been so important, because we would have had a major issue there with people struggling really to pay. But we seem to have got through that now. But interest rates are going to rise, and it isn't something that we control. Household bills, like it's been said, increasing. Cost of oil has just risen drastically in the last few weeks, even though it's been rising over a period of the last probably 12 months as well. So going back to repossessions, and are we finding any difference in that, or is it not just no difference at the moment of that? Because that's something which does scare me. Going back to what we had, was it 90, probably, I don't know, in the last recession we had there, because they do come around. I mean, it does come around there. So has that been calculated into this, or have we not thought about that? Because it's not there, we're not going to think about it, because I know it's doom and gloom, but it's something that we have to just consider.
We can't and won't lose sight of that. I mean, fortunately, we've come through, obviously, I suppose we still are in a period of relatively low interest rates, and mortgage repossessions are, not a massive feature of our current demand. I mean, we certainly get notified of potential repossessions, but as I sit here, I can tell you that the numbers that we've had over the last year or so. But yeah, going forwards, obviously that is something to be extremely mindful of, and as you say, if you combine that with the likes of fuel bills going up, household pressures are going to be, it's just going to increase, isn't it? So so we've not done any, beyond what I've said about the work that I know Judith Langdon is doing. We've not done anything specifically per se concerning that, but it's most definitely one of the risk factors on the horizon.
Could we actually include that within the report then as one of the key risks also in brackets, because it is a key risk. It's one of the major risks, I'd say, more than anything. Drug misuse, all the other factors which create homelessness, that is the major factor there. If the economy or we have major issues revolve around the economy and interest rates, etc., it is a major risk there. Even job stability is good at the moment, as we all know. I mean, people are looking, as an authority, we are looking for people to employ, and it's really difficult to employ people. So job security is really good at the moment, which is a main factor, even though the cost of living. So I would like to just include that somewhere in the report, if that's agreeable, that we put in is a key risk, that if interest rates do move quite significantly, it is a key risk to homelessness as well. My other question to you guys is, I give this a lot of thought, and it is something to do with something in your report there about town centre redevelopment, i.e. Going back to flats above shops, etc. I envisage town centres long term is going to be really difficult, and it's something that we have to bear in mind worldwide there, as the way we do things in the world nowadays is totally different to what it was a decade ago, and it's totally different to probably how we did things probably 2 years ago. Do town centres have a future? Town centres, perhaps in some people's eyes, are still going to move forward, but the long-term perspective with town centres is it's going to be really difficult. So there are going to be vacant shops there, etc. Even though most shops do have flats above them, we're going to have vacant shops, and to fill vacant shops, you need businesses to go into them. And the way things are at the moment, working from home, businesses are looking at rejigging their business plans for the next decade, perhaps. It's something that actually maybe town centres, we may have to put in there something to do with town centres, rightly or wrongly. I'm not being a doom monger here about town centres, but I mean, how long do you leave an empty shop, let's say, before we actually decide what we're going to do with it? Even though they got flats above, you could perhaps create flats below as well with some buildings in town centres. They're ideal in my mind as a better location for homelessness, because you've got every provision around them which people would want. You've got the transport links, they can just nip to the shops, everything's there. You start putting people in rural locations for homeless people, it's really difficult, as we all know. That is probably not the best scenario for people there. So as a rural county, our 5 or 6 main centres do have lots of buildings in commercial buildings there, but it's something that we have to focus on perhaps long term. Is that the answer, that shops or commercial premises may be an ideal scenario to convert into dwellings for this kind of for homeless people, and not for homeless, also for affordable homes as well. But it's something I do envisage long term is going to be something we're going to have to look at, and this report is long term as well, so it may be that's something we focus on, Ian. I think that's the last of my questions, and back to other members. Thanks, Rebecca, your team, Ian, your team, and Stephen and your team. Thank you for your time you've given us, and you say we look forward to the next session, whoever's back here, and in trying to deliver aspirations that we've all got in delivering for Monmouthshire.
Yeah, I think the next thing that we would probably be bringing to you will be the rapid rehousing proposal. That's what we'd expect. So that, again, I'd expect that be around the summer.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, I have no more questions there. Ruth, you've come back in. Is that you wanting to come, or?
Yes, please, Chair. Sorry about that. I just got called away, so I'm sorry I've missed a bit of the last 5 minutes. As Ian will know, I've been on planning ever since I've been there as well, and I've been really pushing about especially the high streets where there are accommodation and in some of the upper floors of some of the commercial properties. And I was advocating that many years ago so that people could live in the built up area, or people who want to leave home single or whatever. But now with our shopping habits changed now since COVID, and more people shop online and everything, but it still needs accommodation for even people just starting out on their own, but they don't perhaps need a car, so they don't need a parking space, they don't need a big garden or anything, they just want accommodation where they can move out from parents and so on. And I think we really must really make every effort to utilise these in the high street. The argument before used to be, oh, it's security, the ownership, but I think that we do have to really make strides in trying to sort of alleviate some of these problems that keep being thrown back at us. Because at the end of the day, no matter what big housing projects we get in the county for affordable housing or whatever housing, we will run out of land. You cannot manufacture land and availability of land because it's needed for food more than anything else, and once it goes under concrete it doesn't come back. So I think we really must make every effort to utilize redundant buildings, whatever, not just for homeless people, but for families and people starting out in life. But they will, as we say, and as you alluded to just now, Chair, the rural areas aren't the place for people starting out if they haven't got cars, or transport is a big issue in this county, and the cost of fuel and everything now is going to highlight it even more. But you know, we're in a position, but perhaps, you know, with some collaboration with all sorts of different agencies, we should be making an effort for our residents in Monmouthshire, because that's what they elect us to do anyway. So thank you, and I thank Ian and Steve and Rebecca for all their presentation today, and look forward to, hopefully, if I get back again, and I will stand again, and we look, and new faces will bring new ideas, obviously, to the table. So it's very interesting to work forward for the residents of Monmouthshire. So thank you very much indeed, Ian, Steve and Rebecca this morning. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ruth. And I'd just like to quote something which I found last week reading a newspaper, the New York Times. A suburb or a district around New York had delivered 176 affordable homes in the last 10 years. 176. Do you know how many's on the waiting list for affordable homes in that district? Take a guess.
Thousands.
Hundreds of thousands. There you go.
Wow.
And if you want to find that article, it really makes interesting reading. So I think it's not just us in Wales or England, it's a worldwide issue. And do you know what? The NIMBYism is exactly the same as what we have here in delivering affordable homes. Exactly the same. They built 176 affordable homes near a substation and a sewerage plant because they weren't allowed or could not deliver in other areas of that district. Isn't that appalling? But it's exactly the same worldwide. It's not just in England or in Wales or in Scotland, it's worldwide. And as I say, and we try our best, but we just got to keep soldiering on. But if you can find that article, it's New York Times, it may have been probably Monday's issue, something like that, but you have a look at that. That is unbelievable, right? And I say, I couldn't believe it when I read it. I showed it to my wife, said, look at that there now. And it was hundreds of thousands of people on the waiting list. And they delivered 176 affordable homes. Right, guys, thank you. We must push on. We got a few items yet to get through. And thanks for everyone. And say, stay safe. I know I keep saying it. It's still out there, and your team do remarkable things out there. And yeah, I mean, we thank you for that. I'm going to have to bid you good day. I need to push on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very much. Bye.
Right, let's get into the financial side of it. Quarter 9. Peter and Tyrone, and who else we got on there? Martin, is it Martin? Sorry, my fault. Let me into my names there. Jonathan.
John Davis.
Sorry, Jonathan. I thought you were Martin then. Could you explain to members Q9 which months they are, etc. Or Q3, sorry. Which months they are, so we have an understanding. And one just clarity for me before we start. Items in red are overspends or underspends. I just need to be clear because it doesn't say in the report there, Jonathan.
I can clear that off.
Yeah, clear that up first.
Like, in terms of your first point, Q3 is months 1 to 9. So the actuals, so it goes from April through to December. Yeah. And then we are trying to project the next 3 months to get a full year spend projection for council to try and advise whether we're on budget or not, and then all of the subsequent consequences of that. In terms of reds and blacks, reds in brackets are traditionally to denote underspends, and then blacks are those of overspends.
Right, okay, everybody got that as members?
We like seeing plenty of reds, not so many blacks, but as I start going through the report, I can explain all of that, because you will see more reds than blacks, but there's a reason for that, and I can allude to that when I do the presentation for the month 9 forecast outturn for you as members.
Okay, so we're going to set the budget tomorrow. So budget, and I've always had this issue as being a member, we're going to set a budget, but actually on delivering the budget from previous year, we haven't actually looked at that, have we, as month 9 to 12. So it is just a stab at it, really, isn't it? Because you're giving us something here today now, which actually isn't the figures that we're going to agree perhaps tomorrow for the directorate. Is that correct?
It's more the timing around where the time that we need to set the budget and that of a forecast. When we start looking at budget setting, traditionally happens around September, October time, and that's when we bring in the month 6 forecast to members. What we try and do then through the various consultation with the public and yourselves as members leading up to the final sign off, we do keep you abreast of any significant changes from month 6 to month 9. It's just been more complicated this year, and I'll allude to that when I do my presentation around the lateness and the amount of short-term funding grants that have come forward to us. So this year is a bit of an anomaly.
Okay, all right, thanks for that.
I think, Chair, the only thing I'd add is in terms of the current year position, all of the information that we're getting back from services, that goes into the mix to drive those budget proposals that are going forward to Cabinet today and to Council tomorrow. So, you know, Tyrone will talk around all of those pressures in adult care and children's care. And yes, we're receiving grant funding this year, but we may not receive that next year. So those pressures make up what we're adding into the budget for next year and what's going to be considered. So I just wanted to add that. Okay,
right, let's go through this, guys.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. In terms of your pack, it starts on page 175, and today I'm here to present the revenue and capital month 9 forecast outturn for the financial year 21-22, which we're currently in. As explained, month 9 forecasting looks at 9 months worth of actuals, another 3 years worth of projection to try and report back to yourselves as councillors on where we think the final year-end outturn is gonna be at. Starting at page 175, if I take you straight into section 2 and the recommendations, the first one 2.1, and for yourselves to note that the council is seeing significant improvements in the forecast outturn, and we are on track to deliver just above a £2 million surplus. Moving into 2.2, that details the reasons for the surplus, and that's namely around the volume and the lateness of one-off grant funding from Welsh Government, and that is welcomed. It is a welcome relief to the bottom line. However, as we've mentioned or just touched upon before the presentation, those pressures moving into next year haven't gone away. This is short-term funding up to the 31st of March. so it's just a one-off fortuitous position for this year. 2.3 highlights that if that surplus does come to fruition in the next month as we close down year end, that will go into replenishing our one-off reserves that have been depleted over the last decade. So that is welcomed to us. I'm sure it's welcome to yourselves as members. If I highlight one note on page 176, the forecast that we're presenting to you today does include an allowance for the 1 3/4 pay award made to us as officers. If I draw your attention to the outturn forecast table in page 177, note 3.4, and overall for the Social Care Directorate is showing a potential overspend of just at £28,000. If I try to put that into context, we've got a budget of just over £53 million for social care and health. So a £28,000 potential overspend is more or less break even. That's a significant improvement since month 6, and that's in the main been down to the amount of short-term grant funding that's come in of late. A good starting point for yourselves would be point 3.14 on page 179 for me to try and look at what pertains to the adult select portfolio. And if we look at adult services, we are projecting an underspend of just over £250,000. That's been an improvement of almost £1 million since month 6. Again, it directly relates to the amount of short-term grant funding that we've had in from Welsh Government that has helped our bottom line position. As part of the budget setting process, just touched on before the presentation, yourselves as members in setting the budget, look at any savings you want to overlay onto service budgets. Page 181 illustrates those savings. For social care and health, we had savings in the budget of £874,000, and those have been met in full. That's despite the challenges of COVID, all of the pressures around care that we mentioned in previous reports this morning. We can still meet those ongoing savings. In terms of capital, there's only one major project for adult social care, and that's the Crick Road development. That's mentioned on page 183. And with the Crick Road care home development, the contractors are currently on site and works have commenced. In terms of the associated appendices, they can give you further details, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Any questions, Chair?
Sorry, I got cut off then. Members, have we got any questions there? Can you raise your hands, please? I don't seem to have any questions for you, Tyrone. Right, can I answer a question, Tyrone?
Yeah, sure, by all means, Councillor.
Reference to the grants then that we receive, is that something that, how do we forecast then for the budget then to the overall budget? Because the grants come in little bits of, do they drip feed the grants, or are they totally like once we have a grant, is it paid in full?
For this year, it's difficult with the amount of one-off grant funding that we've had. This year, we've had a plethora of grants come in, and they for a specific purpose. They've got a start and end date. It's only for this year, and it's specifically targeted. The most recent one is just short of £1.25 million that we've had in. That's specifically for social care to fund any overspends. And that's why we've seen more or less the adult social care overspend wiped out in its entirety from month 6 to month 9. Some other grants are more longer term, such as the Social Care Workforce Sustainability Grant, and that's detailed in as part of the budget pressures, the report and the budget setting for next year you alluded to, Councillor. that you're looking to sign off. So it's a bit of a mix. The short-term ones, they are welcomed, but they don't alleviate the longer-term pressures that we've got. Okay. So it's just a short-term sticking plaster sometimes, or sometimes those grants are specifically targeted, such as unpaid carers, and looking to help them, especially through the COVID period. That's just one example of a short-term grant we've had that's got a specific focus.
Okay, so this financial year, 21 to 22, has been very complex, as referenced to with the COVID hardship fund and grants which have popped up, which we've been entitled to apply for, etc. The next financial year, then, it's going to be a little bit different, possibly, and we'll be back to a little bit of norm. Is that what we're saying? And once we get to that norm, I always have and probably other members do as well, is grants seem to prop up a lot of things. You know, I mean, you need a strategy and a policy to apply for a grant, correct? Most grants anyway. So your policy and your strategy for that grant, or you apply for that grant, I'd like to see actually itemized more, so we know then what's paying for what as reference to a grant. So if you're delivering something on a grant, a lot of members probably don't realise that actually that's being grant funded. They think it's coming from the revenue budget, but it's solely propped up by that grant. A lot of that work or that framework, and I do feel sometimes, and I said this, I don't know if many people remember Moyna Wilkinson, who was head of services. I always said to her, why do we actually apply for some of these grants? Because the short-term grants. So if you have a grant to deliver something, i.e. in the directorate, and it's a 12-month grant, you've then got to fund that from somewhere else if you want to keep that going. So if it's something which actually delivers something which is positive, but you've got no money to deliver it, it means you've done 12 months of delivering that, and then you don't deliver it anymore. And I do feel sometimes, is it right to apply for that grant if you know you're not going to deliver the next phase of that grant? You don't want to, and it's something which I've always found a little bit complex in having a grant. Are we having it for the sake of having it? You see my point? Are we having that grant for the sake of having it? So I'd like them to actually be. I know a few years ago when Joy, we used to get a sheet with all the grants on, itemised, whether it was Tidy Wales or feeding the dogs home or whatever we used to get, and then in brackets then it used to be we've applied for it but we haven't actually had it, but we built it into the budget, let's say. So I know this year 21-22, which we're looking at, it's really difficult to do that, but I think in the future that's where I will be looking for is and then we can scrutinise that a little bit more then and look at it in a different direction. So we've got a load of figures here. Perhaps, you know, I mean, I'll be honest, I'll have my hands up. I probably don't understand some of the portfolios that they actually are written within that budget thing. I don't know much about them portfolios. So it does get complicated then, and that's why I said in red and black, making sure members are well aware what the overspends are or the underspends. All right, that's just my point I'd like to make is the grants seem to prop up a lot of what we're doing here at the moment, but in the future, me personally, I would like to see a better provision within in brackets. Let's just say we budget £200,000 and we've had a grant of £100,000 for it. I know then what that grant, because it makes it a big better picture for most, I would have thought. Am I right in saying that, or am I wrong in saying that?
No, it is a good point. In terms of grants, we have got quite a comprehensive central grants register that people like myself work with John on. So that's something me and John can look at moving forward, how we feed that into these reports. A useful insight for members is the director's commentary. If we look at the chief officer's director's commentary, it does reference the effects on those grants, where it does say if we didn't have those one-off grants, the bottom line position would be £3 million worse. That sort of helps quantify how much the grants are helping to prop up the bottom line, councillor. In terms of the grants, I suppose we won't want to look a gift horse in the mouth in terms of the grant, and sometimes it's delivered in such a way where you're not asked to apply for it. This is the grant, we've given it to all 22 local authorities, even though we signed to accept it. It's pretty much fair to company anyway. During COVID, it has made it a lot more complicated because the COVID hardship fund has propped up a lot of areas throughout the council, not just social care. Moving away from that, it is going to present a significant challenge. How we try and go back to what the new norm is. I don't think things will ever go back to what they were 2 years ago. The world's in a different place. But what is that new equilibrium? That's what we're going to have to find out after COVID. And what happens once all of these grants start being removed? We've got to find our new base, if you like, councillor. So it's going to be hard to try and predict that at the moment. And like I said, with the mix of the grants, the short-term ones are for that specific purpose. It's come in specific scheme, such as unpaid areas, and we end up sort of being like the banker, if you like. The money comes into us, we make sure we meet the terms and conditions, and it goes straight out. Other grants are more where they are helping to prop up our main core expenditure, if you like, and it's those ones that are the sort of dangerous ones that we have to keep on monitoring. As John said before, the pressure doesn't go away, so that's why we're trying to advise yourselves as councillors in the forthcoming year's budget setting. Even though we've had these grants this year and it looks healthy, that pressure hasn't gone away.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll just lose track of it, and we won't know what the grants are being accounted for, and that's why we try and bring it up in this kind of process, councillor.
Okay, it was just something said in the last council meeting about a grant we'd had, and it hadn't been spent on what it should have been spent. It was spent on something else. It was just something that I would like a little bit more transparency on making sure that £100,000 has been spent on that, and solely that's what we applied for. But yeah, I mean that's another matter, but it's something which was raised in the last council meeting, which just made me think that actually we need to make it a little bit more accountable to everyone, that we are spending what we should be spending on what it's applied for. You see my point?
Is a very good point, because with those grants they have got specific T's and C's, or sorry, terms and conditions attached to them, and we have to make sure when we spend against those grants we do adhere 100% to those terms and conditions.
Okay, all right, no
Thanks.
problem. Right, I've got Louise.
Yeah, just following the discussion, it sounds like really rather than all these grants would be better with a lot more core funding really for services, you know, because that would provide more stability. You mentioned when you were doing the presentation that adults have managed to reach all of their targets with regard to savings. What sort of savings have there been, and can you reassure us that they won't be impacting services? Thank you.
If I take your first point, councillor, in terms of the grants, I can't disagree with it. If it was part of core funding, that would definitely give us more financial stability, because with the grants, it's for a specific purpose. Once it's gone, then can we step down from that expenditure, or like Councillor Howarth was saying, have we now got to meet that expenditure from core services? So it does give us a significant challenge. In terms of the savings, I think I have to applaud the service in trying to cope with COVID, the demands of delivering social care, along with Eve's report to you this morning, as well as trying to deliver those levels of savings. It's been a significant achievement. And what we are trying to do is make sure there's no impact to the end user. In terms of moving forward, it's hard to give a guarantee, but what we try and do is what we do sorry to use two do's together, is be responsible when we are putting savings forward. When you're signing off the budget for next year, you'll see for social care, except for any increases in fees and charges, we are not putting any savings forward for next year, because pretty much the well has run dry on those savings. This is more or less the final year we could eke out those levels of savings moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things also is on the homelessness side is that I understand that there's going to be a further grant to September to help with all our B&B costs. But you know what happens after that?
It's difficult with B&B. It's the same as social care. When the COVID hardship fund is removed at the end of this month, is going to present a significant challenge in terms of social care like B&B moving forward on how we support that marketplace moving forward. And sometimes we haven't got all of the answers at the moment around it.
Because I understood it was finishing at the end of March, but then there was some further fund that was going to basically make it carry on until September.
I think John Davis might have the more technical details on that for you, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks Ty.
John.
And Chair, if you don't mind if I come in. As Ty said, the hardship fund will end. There are other avenues for us to explore in terms of that homeless funding from a revenue perspective, in terms of some of the grant streams that are available to housing for those. It's a little bit early to say whether that will meet all of our pressures coming forward for next year. But what we have included in next year's budget, and what you'll see in the budget papers that are coming forward, is headroom in the capital budget of £2 million, and that's been put forward as investment that will allow those needs that we'd heard about earlier in the meeting to somewhat be met where we do encounter emergency situations, whether that's through securing alternative accommodation that's available, or whether it's through other means in terms of developing existing council buildings and such like. So there is provision being put in place. Be it quite right to raise it as a risk that we carry into next year, alongside all the others, and one which we need to carefully monitor as we go through the year.
Well, thank you. You know, at least it's been anticipated. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I think you might be on mute. Sorry, Chair.
I am, yeah. Sorry about that. Right, can I just ask you, Tyrone, about the budget heading winter pressures grant and budgeted 627? What is that? Because that's quite a large amount there, and it's unbudgeted for. And then if I take them reds there, net reduction in staff requirement over the period of 104. Then I've gone further down the page, staff vacancies 108. So you're talking like just under £250,000 on that one. So you're talking, you know, you're touching on really, I mean, nearly £1 million there, like which is quite a lot of money there. Let's start with the winter pressures grant and budgeted for. What is that?
With the winter pressures, that's what I was alluding to earlier on in my presentation, in terms of the swing for adult social care from month 6 to month 9, where we've pretty much wiped out our overspend. That's what our winter pressures grant is for. It was last minute grant announced by Welsh Government, and is specifically targeted to those local authorities where their social care departments were forecasting overspends. And the Welsh Government has flooded, I suppose, those councils to try and offset any overspends. And that's been the result. And for us, we've greatly benefited from that, which has taken us from an overspend in adult social care down to a slight underspend, and has changed our position in 1 quarter by almost £1 million. That's been one of the biggest factors in the reduction in the overspend by that £1 million, sorry, from quarter 2 to quarter 3, is the award of our winter pressures grant. But again, it's one off fortuitous grant. that's not going to then go into next year, just a one-off.
And listening to everything today, staff vacancies as well. You know, I mean, they're going to have to be filled, aren't they? You know, I mean, I mean, because the pressure there on departments and recruiting staff, which we're saying is what we require. You know, I mean, there's quite a considerable amount there as well, isn't there? I.e., social services, etc., and social workers.
But in terms of the social care vacancies, is going back to my statement I made in Eve's presentation. It's difficult to get carers. We're all competing from the same pot. You've got external private contractors. They're trying to recruit into the social care market. We are trying to recruit as well, and it just isn't those bodies. People just don't want to go into the care sector. I don't know whether they just don't see it as glamorous, for want of a better word, or what I was summarising before. You've got to make sure you're registered to go into someone's care home to provide care. That comes with a lot of responsibility. For what, £9 an hour, where you could walk into Wetherspoons bar with no training for £12, £13 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that market is depleted. It's hard to try and get that recruitment. How do you try and see that as someone leaving school, for example, as a career to go into the care sector? It's a very challenging environment that we're working in at the moment.
But them staff vacancies aren't in brackets just for that, are they? You know, I mean, they've got to be other factors as well, like i.e. Social workers, etc. You know, I mean, you know, I mean, it's like public protection, staff vacancies, community care staff vacancies. Every department there's got staff vacancies, so they won't be for care, will they? You know, there's got to be other factors as well built around that. Are we understaffed then in a lot of these people retired and not being replaced? Or
the answer I was given is more for the portfolio that's pertaining to this select, and that's around adult social care, and the major vacancies are not that of social workers. It is more of care staff. If you want to look wider within the directorate around social care, in children's services, for example, the vacancies are social workers, and it's always difficult to recruit social workers for children's services.
Okay.
Thanks.
Right.
In terms of public protection, that's going to be detailed when you sit in council to sign off the budget, because we've got a pressure of £263,000 in public protection to look at bolstering the staffing complement for public protection. So that'll be covered off with the pressures. But adult social care, in the main, the vacancies exist within that of getting carers in-house.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
And what about long-term sickness and things like that? They you know, I mean, I'm just trying to build a picture here of the costs going back to our previous issues, reference to care and paying pensions, etc. You know, I mean, and recruiting. You know, I mean, it is quite a vast amount of money here, and sickness and things like that have all got to be built in. Okay, I'll let that one go at the moment, because I mean,
I think it's a valid point, Councillor. If you don't mind coming back on that, because if you've taken the time to raise the point is valid, I think it deserves an answer. In terms of sickness, that is a challenge for us, and is more around how we deal with illnesses such as COVID. There's been a challenge where people have had to self-isolate. You've got staff that are suffering from long COVID. And that is an issue, and it does have a financial consequence, especially for carers, because we can't have someone without care because a member of staff have gone off with COVID. We have to try and recruit to cover that sickness, and we may have to go to agency. But again, they're struggling to try and get carers the same as we are.
Okay. But hopefully, keep us fingers crossed, that will wean itself out the system. But you know, I mean, we're still going to be a very difficult year coming ahead, I think. So I'd like, when we sign off the final budget, which, you know, I mean, won't be till till probably July 22. You know, we're going to have a better understanding then of where we are. And when the grants come in then for 22, 23, we are going to have a better understanding, I would have thought, of where the main pressures are going to be. Yeah.
I would hope. What I've given up trying to do is predict COVID.
I know.
Because I thought that was the case 3 months ago, and then you have a variant like Omicron come in, and then again you're left with the same difficulties. One would hope now with the removal or downgrading of certain restrictions, with the COVID fund going, stepping down possibly of TTP in 3 months' time, you would hope that we've seen the worst. And going back to my words, we can try and find our new equilibrium. If you like, but certainly 22, 23, I would see would be that transition year of moving out of COVID and what the new norm is.
Yeah, okay. All right, yeah, okay. Yeah,
thanks.
No problem. Thanks for that, Tyrone. Jonathan, anything you want to include in what we've been discussing there? Anything or anything you want
Simon, Sheila's waiting to speak for
Yeah.
ages. Have you noticed it?
Have I noticed? Well, I've just been up to my hands there and I didn't see anything up there.
Yes.
Let me let Jonathan come back in then. Jonathan?
I think Tyrone's covered everything in pretty much lots of detail there. Chair, I'm happy to for Sheila to go in.
Okay, Sheila.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say at this point it's been extremely interesting listening to all the sort of information that you've passed over to us today. I mean, the report show is like all reports, we get a lot of information in them, but when you go into detail and to give us a background behind all of these things, you've actually been thanking Eve for what she does with her services, but I think she couldn't do it without you. I mean, these last 2 years, the budgets must have been so complicated, the finances must have been so difficult. None of us knew where we were going with regard to COVID and all the added pressures. You've explained it all, and I just wanted to say that being on this journey with you and listening to all these reports in these meetings about the finances has been very much appreciated, because we've all been very, very concerned about how the council's going to go forward, and you've done it. You've done it, and I just wanted to say thank you for that, because you know you've had an awful lot of pressures, and putting together a budget in normal days is hard going, but this has been extremely challenging for you all, and I just wanted to add that. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Maureen, do you have a question or anything? No.
Sheila's said more or less what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, I've got no more questions there of the members of the committee. So thank you both, and passing our thanks to the staff there. And hopefully see you tomorrow, is it?
Yeah, I think John's going to be there tomorrow. If you can just excuse me just for a couple of seconds, just to come back, just like to thank all of the kind words that councillors have shown throughout this morning. Thanks for your support in what has been a very difficult trying circumstances. And then I'd just like to give thanks to Councillor Harris and Councillor Edwards, because I just can't believe I've been working with some members for almost 2 decades. And I can just, unfortunately, that's the only time I can remember having a fringe that I could come, was 2 decades ago. But just thank you very much for those ones that have been on this long journey, and your support has helped to shape us in our direction, keep us on our toes, which you've been elected to do, even though it was a challenge. It has been great. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for that, Tyrone and Jonathan.
It's been teamwork, Tyrone. Teamwork, that's what it's all about.
Touche, touche. It's nice to see you're still there as well, because it is a continuing journey. Thank you.
I just don't, I hope I'm not here in 2 decades time though. But thank you very much.
Make sure you get it right for the future. That's what you're trying to do anyway, Tyrone. Thank you.
Yeah, very difficult.
And thanks, Chairman, for allowing me just those couple of seconds to come back. Yeah,
I don't know how many. I say I've been with Roger on 18. Are we 18 years, Roger?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I say I don't know how many's coming back there. I haven't even asked the question, to be honest with you, but I think we'll see a new council this time, i.e. a lot of new members and a lot of new questions as well, but hopefully new direction as well. We are the 21st century and things are changing, and hopefully we'll move forward as a council. I think no more hands. I've got nothing else. Yeah, take our special thanks back to everyone within your departments that we may not say it all the time, but we do thank you for your hard work, and it's been a real difficult couple of years we've had, and hopefully we'll move forward in a positive attitude anyway.
You can go on strike now, I think, Chair.
I will certainly pass that on to the various teams.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Okay. Right, okay. Right, members, let's move on to the next agenda item. Let me just get my agenda back up here. That's one thing I've found really difficult in the last couple of years, is trying to run two screens, which, as you all know, is not the easiest, because when your one screen doesn't work. Right, we've got budget monitoring, we've done that. Confirmation of the minutes from our previous meeting. Do I have a pause and a second that they're an accurate and true record from the meeting? I got a few flicks and I've got Ruth.
Move. Yeah, propose, yeah.
Yeah, I've got Louise as a proposer and Ruth as a seconder. Okay, can we move them as accurate and true record of the meeting we had? Yeah, right, that's good. That's good. Adult Select Committee Forward Work Programme. Everybody's had a look at that. I know it's really difficult with changes that we're going to have within the meeting structure, which will be agreed in full council tomorrow if it goes through. But we still will have a work programme, maybe in a different format. The one thing I don't want to let go off the agenda is the Gypsum Traveller site issue that I thought may have come to us before April, but seemingly it's not going to. So if we can keep that on the agenda, please, Hazel, that'd be really good.
Yes, Chair, it's going to be for the new committees to set their work programme, but I have chased that up because that's quite a key piece of work and it's still ongoing. I think in terms of all your other items that you intended to scrutinise, you've pretty much done those, but as we know, everything continues and progress reports will continue. But yes, it'll be for the new committee to set its work programme, Chair. Okay, thank you for that, Hazel. Cabinet and Council work programme as is. Everybody happy with that? As you know, that will not change, I wouldn't have thought anyway. So they still have a forward planner on policy and decision making, which will come to its relevant select committees. And then we got the date of the next meeting. I think that won't be set in stone, will it, Hazel? That'll be just something that we'll diary in to put forward as at least there's something in there. Is that right? Yeah, I believe that the council diary is to be approved with all the dates of the future meetings. So yes, it'll be after June when members will be inducted and so on. There'll be quite a period of training to go through. Okay, thanks for that. Do I have any members want to ask anything before we move to close the meeting? Nope, it's all gone quiet. Right, thank you for your time this morning, and a special thanks to Hazel and Rob for helping us out here in Adult Select over the years. Can I thank you both for that? I've known Hazel for many years, and Rob's come on board now in the last 12 months there. Thank you both for your time in this really difficult period we've had there, but it's been deliverable. We've done really well, so I'm really pleased with that. Special thanks to Roger, who is moving on, to himself and to Maggie. I've known you for many years, Roger, and I've had great times with you, Roger, doing the affordable housing over them years. I don't know if any more members are moving on. I'm not too sure. I think everybody's staying on board then. I think there's only Roger who maybe going to enjoy his retirement.
But I do thank you, Roger, for your time.
Yeah.
Ruth, Sheila, Maureen, Martin, Louise, who else? Malcolm, is it? Yeah, Malcolm Lane. I thank you for your time on this committee, this period, and I wish you well and good luck in your campaigns to come back to work in Monmouthshire County Council. I wish you well in that. I think that's it, really. I have nothing else to say. Just wish you all good health and look after yourselves, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
If I can just come in there as well. Thanks, Simon, for your good work. Yeah, we've done some interesting stuff over the years, and you know, adults is the best select, no doubt about it. So, and I've always enjoyed it, and big thanks, lovely Hazel that's hiding in the background. I've just got that little picture there because we've done lots over the years, and thanks, Hayes, and thanks to all of you. A lot of you know where I live, so if you're walking past, there's always biscuits here. So look forward to seeing some of you.
Thank you, Roger.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you all tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Hazel, Rob, have you got a minute just to pre-meet or after meet chat, just to make sure we covered everything there and
Go.
Amen.
No.